Welcome to the 11th annual FedTalks, a 3-day event presented by FedScoop. I'm Goldie Kamali, your host and CEO of Scoop News Group, and I'm thrilled you could join us today. For the past 12 years, my team and I have been working closely with the White House on the top tech priorities of the administration, bringing the brightest people from government and tech together to collaborate, exchange best practices, and identify new ways to work together to achieve common goals. FedTalks is the best of those sessions, as well as some fresh new faces coming together to discuss ways technology can transform government. As always, we have some of the most prestigious tech leaders in the country participating in FedTalks and have an incredible lineup for you this week for 3 days, Tuesday through Thursday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Our speakers include C-level executives from the Executive Office of the President, Department of Defense, civilian agencies, the IC community, members of Congress, as well as leaders from some of the largest tech companies in the world. Today on day one of FedTalks, we'll be discussing AI in defense, machine learning and automation, computer science and education, technology in the remote workforce, the role of data in criminal justice, and AI-powered computing. The goal for today is that you learn something new and leave inspired to do something big. Please tweet at us using the hashtag FedTalks. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our diamond sponsors who made this event possible: AWS, Dell Technologies, Google Cloud, IBM, Intel, Leidos, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Qualtrics, Salesforce, SUSE, VMware, and Worldwide Technology. With that, let's kick off our program. I'm thrilled to introduce our first session. In one of their first joint public appearances, please welcome the Honorable Dana Deasy, CIO of Department of Defense, and the new JAIC Director, Lieutenant General Michael Groan, here with FedScoop Editor-in-Chief, Billy Mitchell. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us today to kick off FedTalks 2020. And what a great first panel we have to begin with today. I'm FedScoop Editor-in-Chief Billy Mitchell, and it's my great pleasure to talk with two of the DoD's top officials in IT and AI, the Honorable Dana Deasy, CIO of the DoD, and Lieutenant General Michael Groan, Director of DoD's Joint AI Center. Mr. Deasy, General Groan, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thanks, Billy.
Here.
Absolutely. This is really exciting to have both of you sitting next to each other because I know you're both working on a lot when it comes to the future of the JAIC. Obviously, the JAIC's been around for several years, but I'm looking forward to hearing what's sort of next. But let's start with where we're at today. Obviously, Lieutenant General Groan has been in this role for about a month or two as Director of JAIC, and I'd love to sort of get a sense of how it's been bringing General Groan on board and what the two of you have been prioritizing in these early days.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start on that. So when General Shanahan announced his retirement, I remember sitting down in my office one evening and just saying, okay, write down on a piece of paper those things that we think are going to be important to whoever the next leader was. And the first and the foremost was obviously somebody who really understood the warfighter. I think we'll probably get into a further discussion today on that. And then, like any organization, JAIC has had the same sort of startup growth pains that you would see in any kind of VC. And so for me, the first thing was somebody that would know how to take JAIC that has kind of gone from this young startup, rapidly growing, to now needing to have real kind of discipline process put into it. And so for me, it was all about somebody who really could focus on the warfighter part of this, but some at the same time who would now know how to take JAIC and elevate it. At least that's what I was looking for. Now, what did I actually get out of that?
As far as you know, sir, that's what we're actually doing. So that's great. But honestly, we are very compelled by the transformation of warfare, and then the necessary transformation of the way the department fights. And we are absolutely committed to making sure that we don't send our young, sons and daughters into a fight that with a disadvantage, right? So with information age warfare, coming into real being now, things that we have to pay real attention to, we want to make sure that we are transforming the department at that pace. And we're looking to to facilitate, to enable, and to align across the department to make sure that we're driving the transformation to the greatest degree and at the greatest speed that the department can muster.
That's
You're not
great.
going fast enough. You still need to go faster.
Mr. Deasy, you mentioned, Jake's kind of had a background as sort of a startup organization, and obviously it's not at that point anymore. It started to grow. It's no longer this tiny body. It's doing things across the department and has a number of mission areas that it's working in. So as it's continuing to mature and scale as a driver of AI transformation, I'd love to hear about the vision for this growth and the strategy to ensure that it's successful. In a sense, my question is, what does the future of the Jake look like?
Yeah, it just literally, it seems like just yesterday that I remember us issuing the first memo announcing Jake and sitting down with about 4 or 5 people who made up the entire Jake organization. We couldn't even rub 2 nickels together to get a budget started. I think we stole a few desks inside the Pentagon somewhere. And that was literally how we formed Jake. And I tell that story only because if you go talk to any young startup, they'll literally tell the stories of a few people sitting around and actually getting the thing going. And we went through that. I think one of the things that we've wanted to keep in our DNA is this idea that we want to hire a lot of diversity of thought into this organization, but yet do that in a way where that diversity of thought coalesces around a couple of really important themes. And this is to your point about, where do we take this in the future? So when we started, it was, we need to grab hold of some projects that can show people that we can be nimble, we can be agile, and we have the talent to give something that is meaningful back to the department. So we started in a variety of different places, but now as we've matured, we've started to say, that was great, the prototype, great to demonstrate, but now we really need to focus on what was the core mission all along for Jake. And that was, we have to figure out what is the role that AI plays in enabling the warfighter. And I've always said that Jake should be central to any and all future discussions in that place. So, I'd love to hear from your thoughts on how are we doing now, moving from working on a bunch of things to really getting focused on the future of warfighting?
Right. So I used the transformation word before, and transformation is our vision, right? So it's a big job. We discovered pretty quickly that seeding the environment with lots of small AI projects was not transformational in and of itself. And so we knew we had to do more. And so what we're calling Jake 2.0 is a focused transition in a couple of ways. One is, we're going to continue to build AI products because the talent in the Jake is just superb. I mean, that's kind of my number one observation coming in. Just amazing people with amazing ability. Now we have to get their ability and their talent focused in the right place. We'll continue to do products, although we may not build as many models because we're really thinking about solution spaces for a broad base of customers. And that really gets us focused on enablement. There are, the application and the utilization of AI across the department is very uneven. We have places that are really good, and some of the services are just doing fantastic things. And we have some places, large scale enterprises with fantastic use cases, really could use AI, but they don't know where to start. So we're going to shift from a transformational perspective to start looking at that broad base of customers and enable them. And so how, kind of give everybody a step up. We create a rising tide, which lifts everybody's boat, so that now we can take advantage of, all of the levers of transformation. We can become problem pull, where an enterprise has an issue, and we'll let them pull us into that problem and then help bring solutions to that problem, for example. And we're going to continue to work with the services on cutting edge of AI and AI application, especially in the integration space, where we're bringing together intelligence and fires or intelligence and maneuver, so the warfighting functions that have, superb stovepipes. But now we need to bring those stovepipes together and integrate them through AI. So that's the kind of stuff that we're focused on now.
That's great to hear. I would imagine part of that rising tide, if you will, is the Joint Common Foundation. It's sort of an infrastructure that you guys launched recently that spans across the DoD to help services, other agencies with their AI applications. So I'd love to hear a bit about how that is going and what it does and how services are using it successfully.
When we started Jake, we said, what is the single most important thing that we'll look back on someday, that history will write about Jake? And we said it has to be about the Joint Common Foundation. I mean, Jake could never do all of the AI initiatives for the Department of Defense, nor was it ever created to do that. But what we did say was people who are going to really roll up their sleeves and seriously start trying to leverage AI to help the warfighter, every day are going to wake up and they're going to say, where's that platform I go to use? Where's those tools? Where's those models that are already available to me? So at the core of Jake's success has got to be this Joint Common Foundation. And I know that since you've come on, General Groen, I think you guys have done quite a bit to move that on. And it might actually be helpful to kind of share and bring it to life. Where are we actually at now and making that real?
Yeah, great question, sir. So JCF is very real, really powerful. And you think from a department perspective, I mean, you can't have an AI-driven enterprise without a platform. And so there are platforms that exist. One of the things, though, that's a pretty significant need is sort of the idea, all of these disadvantaged users who don't really have a place to start. We can help them. And the Joint Common Foundation, the platform that we're building, is a starting point for disadvantaged users. And then we're going to grow it. So it's under construction now. We'll have some basic services, around, when we turn into fiscal or calendar year 21. And then, but it's a MVP, a minimum viable product approach where we're building some basic services, a lot of native services from cloud providers, but then adding services to that. And where we hope to grow the technical platform is a place where people can bring their data, places where we can offer data services, data conditioning, maybe data labeling, and we can start curating data. One of the things we'd really like to be able to do for the department is start cataloging and storing algorithms and data. So now we have an environment so we can share data, training data, for example, across programs. How powerful would that be? Sharing algorithms. One of the things we've discovered is, the problems across the department that we can solve through AI, they cluster, meaning you can reuse algorithms across different applications. So we want to create an environment we can do that. And then the last thing I'll mention about the platform, because I think in the JCF, there's a soft services side to the JCF as well. So what I'm talking about there is things like test and evaluation best practice, things like how to instantiate an ethical foundation. I could talk for an hour on an ethical foundation and how that leads to trust in AI systems that we have fielded across the department. Contract access to contracts, advice for contracting if somebody needs to build their own contract. Like I said before, we want to think about solutions, and in a lot of cases, especially some of our more advanced consumers, all they need is like access to a contract vehicle. They don't really need anything else, so we can do that for them. Somebody else might need a complete AI readiness evaluation to see how their enterprise can benefit from AI. We can do that too, and we're going to do all that based on the platform as it rolls out.
People have said to me time and time again, why such a fixation on this Joint Common Foundation? And I'll say, it kind of reminds me of the days when GitHub first started. And why it was so successful is developers and people who create things love to show off, love to share, love to make their work accessible. And that creates this flywheel of success. And so if we can figure out how to create, our Joint Common Foundation in a way where people can come in, create these libraries, make them accessible to other people, I really believe it will have this multiplier effect across the department.
Yeah, that's a great analogy and a great way to put it. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, though, thinking about a platform like the JCF, if not talking about the need for digital modernization across the DoD, things like cloud, data management, cybersecurity, and how that all plays into the move to AI. So I'd love to move to how this groundwork for modernization prepares services as they move closer to AI.
You know, each day as I work with General Groen and we talk about all the various challenges they have to solve for, and I think people sometimes don't appreciate it is truly a multidimensional problem. You know, one day we're talking about the common foundation and the basic infrastructure. You need a cloud. The next day we're talking about how do you build the AI algorithms and push them out. And then that leads a conversation around command and control and communications and the resiliency of getting that out to the edge. And then we end up in this data conversation that's all about how are we going to feed the right data in to the common foundation for these algorithms. And then finally, we always end up with what are we doing to make this cyber resilient? So when we created the digital modernization, I think it was obvious to everybody the parts were the right parts, but actually it comes to life. You actually see how these are codependent on each other is incredibly strong. Maybe you can go to a little more detail on how that actually shows up at the face of Jake every day.
Yeah, so all of the tenets of digital modernization, the things that are coming down the pike are awesome. They're timely, and they're absolutely necessary. When we talk about, the cloud strategies and, like actually building a department that's focused on generating data that it can use in decision-making. I'm really excited about software modernization because all of these things provide a platform for us to now layer on AI. Yeah. I think, a risk is, people sort of conflate digital modernization and artificial intelligence, right? That, well, if we have, JADC2, for example, as an empowered network, that we automatically get AI on top of that. And I think it's important to note that JADC2 foundation, the cloud foundation, the modernized software foundation now gives us a platform so we can build AI. And so AI has to be a conscious application layer that's applied, leveraging the platform and the things that digital modernization provide. But when you think of it that way, holy cow, what a platform to operate from. So now we will really have a place where the joint force can effectively operate. And now we can really start integrating intel and fires, intel and maneuver, command and control. Just think about like the logistics enterprise, the combat logistics enterprise, and sort of the broad support enterprise. Maintenance, predictive maintenance on vehicles and weapons. I mean, it's just an enormously powerful thing. You can't do any of that without a platform, and you can't do any of that without those digital modernization tenets.
So as we wrap up, we have a couple more minutes left. I'd love to ask the two of you, looking forward into calendar year 2021, what's ahead? What are your offices working on respectively? Obviously, you both kind of oversee a large swath of DoD's IT and AI portfolio. So I'd love to get a sense of what we in this audience can expect out of DoD in this coming year.
Well, I think General Groen's going to know what I'm about to say here because it's the conversation we have every Friday when we have our one-on-one. Where are we in digitally transforming the warfighter? Mm-hmm. When I meet with the C3 head, the cloud head, software modernization, cyber, when we created our logo for digital modernization, and we put the warfighter at the center of it, I think the rest of this year and definitely in the next year, as we talk more publicly about things like JADC2, it's going to become very crystal clear why we put the warfighter in the middle of everything, because everything we're going to do in digital modernization keeps pointing right back into, is this supporting, is this helping and enabling the warfighter in a different way?
Yeah. And so when you think about all of the things we just talked about, okay, now we're getting the plumbing and wiring into place, and now just enormous opportunities are available to us. And this is where I really get excited about warfighting integration, especially. The services are all doing fantastic things, and things that are necessary for kind of their domain or the things that they're most interested in. And that's great. we want to now start building on that to start bringing integrated artificial intelligence capabilities and a whole, if we're going to have like the whole force operating at the speed of machines, then we have to start bringing these artificial intelligence applications together into an ecosystem. And it has to be a trusted ecosystem, meaning, we actually have to know if we're going to, bring data into a fires situation, capability, we have to know that that's good data. So how do we build an ecosystem so that we can know the provenance of data? We can ensure that the algorithms are tested to a satisfactory way, that we can comfortably and safely integrate data and decision making across warfighting functions. That's the kind of stuff that I think it's really exciting, because that's the real transformation that we're after. Applying AI to small functional components of the force is really good. But where we're really going to get the magic is when we start automating broad swaths of decision, not just decision making per se, but command and control, and no kidding, presenting data to decision makers across the force in a really effective way. So I'm really excited about it. As I mentioned before, we're nascent stages in a couple of areas. Things like test and evaluation. Test and evaluation is so critical. And there are just so few like real true experts in test and evaluation for AI. And so we've got to figure out, how do we scale T&E? How do we get best practices out there? How do we teach and learn from each other about how you make sure that you have trusted systems? Trust is going to be the watchword when we get to a level of maturity where we have AI instantiated in a lot of different places across the force. And so building, getting user buy-in and user ownership of data sources, of decision making and decision flows, of what decision you actually need to make a decision. This is warfighting business, right? And I've said this before. I'll say it here for our listeners. We can't think about AI as something that that's IT. That somebody brings in for you. It's not a black box that some contractor sets on your desk. AI models your decision-making process, Commander, your data flows, Commander, your process and your good judgment for how you bring data into a decision. It just allows you to do it a lot faster, right? So that's what we're after. You'll start to see some of that stuff in 21, and then hopefully we continue to grow beyond that.
I'll just end by saying, people will say, how will we know when Jake is successful? Is when the term Jake is used in conversations at all levels. When people will say, well, was that data run through Jake? Did those algorithms get pushed out today through Jake? Did you guys go to Jake and put that in the library? Did you go and look at the integration solutions from Jake? So when that word Jake starts to get used in the vernacular of people's day-to-day conversations, then I'll feel like the original vision that we put in place for Jake is really starting to be brought to life.
Fantastic. Well, we'll leave it at that. We'll look forward to everything you guys just mentioned and more next year. But for now, thank you guys so much, Mr. Deasy, General Groen, for kicking us off in FedTalks 2020. It was a great conversation, very fascinating, and I can't wait to catch up more in the near future. But for now, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Billy. Appreciate it. And to everybody listening, good luck.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Andrew Moore. I am responsible for artificial intelligence in Google Cloud, and I want to really thank everyone for the opportunity to talk here today. This is a very important forum. And as you can see, I'm going to talk about my great passion for my whole career, which is artificial intelligence, and especially the 4 things which I've really learnt over the years are the critical factors in whether an artificial intelligence deployment is going to work or not. Before I jump into those 4 factors, let me talk a little bit about why I love artificial intelligence, and I have ever since I was a teenager. It's because we have all these opportunities to, it's one of those science fiction-y types of things which we can actually build right now. We're probably not going to accomplish time travel or faster than light speed or contact with aliens over the next few decades. This one, we can do it right now. And it means that we've got the power to do massive and very adaptive computation to help make decisions that we individual humans just don't have the machinery in our brains to do. There are some things, not everything, but there are some things where superhuman computation or being able to consider 1 trillion different possibilities before making a decision are exactly what computers are good at. And so as you see on this slide, things from robotics to rapid design of new drugs to the management of cities in a way where you're going to reduce pollution, or the safe operation of all kinds of safety critical industries where we want to get death rates and injury rates down. There's all of these potential goodnesses coming out of AI, but it's very hard to make a successful artificial intelligence project. And I'll explain why. And I'll explain why for me and my team here at Google, trying to mitigate these difficulties is what keeps us going. So here are the 4 things I'm going to talk to you about today. And of course, very briefly, but I want to get across these basic messages. Product management is going to turn out to be really important. And this is the idea that we have to design our artificial intelligences with people in mind and how it affects an organization's operation, how it affects the lives of end users. You cannot do technology by itself. Second is trust. There has been a techlash, especially in the Western liberal democracies, around this question of what does it mean for an AI to be using data to make decisions and all the implications of that. Next, the question of life after launch. This is the real importance that if you've built an AI which is learning from experience and is getting better and better, you better make sure that you have a system in place which is monitoring that AI and which has humans in the loop, going out days, weeks, months, years, and I predict even decades into the future. Finally, AI for all. I believe that now, as we're entering the 3rd decade of the 21st century, we're at the point where you do not need to be a PhD expert in artificial intelligence in order to build AIs. We've just hit this threshold where regular folks, people who can play with spreadsheets or can modify Minecraft, that's the level of technology skill you need in order to be able to build an AI. Not these kind of advanced things. And I really need the whole world to start building its own AIs. So let's jump into each of these because they're all very interesting. Product management. Only 14% of AI projects actually end up working out. The other 86% will end up in a proof of concept valley of death, or they might not even get that far if there's internal warfare over what data can and cannot be used or how it can be used. This is why, and I'm not going to read this whole slide, this is why when you are running an AI project, you have to have the technology track and the product management track. Technology track, those of you familiar with running big engineering projects, you know about making sure you've got a good platform, one which supports rapid prototyping, but is measurable. And then you need to make sure you've got something where your scientists who've played with AI can press a button to compile it so that it runs securely and reliably in production. That's the easy bit, technology track. I say it's easy for me because I'm a technologist all my career, and so I feel comfortable. The blue stuff, for me, a decade ago when I first joined Google, was all new. And this I've learnt through experience and through working with some of the best product managers on the planet is equally important. And when we bring this in, we're able to up our success rate of AI projects, so that now much of Google, as you know, is run on artificial intelligence. And the way this happens is you're not allowed to start a project until you've got customer user journeys in place. These are things where you've really analyzed what it means to every participant. You don't let the project move forward until it crosses the various legal and ethical privacy preserving aspects. And it turns out you need to do political stuff. Usually, and this is, if you're going to learn one thing from this talk, this is the one to remember. Usually, artificial intelligence does involve huge amounts of automation. Automation necessarily means you've got an organizational change as well as a technology change. And so you cannot design your AI without thinking about how this impacts the operation of your organization right from the start. And I've seen plenty of cases where the AI is fine, but it turns out the organization is not ready for the change management for that kind of automation. And so the project sits there on the shelf. Maybe it's going to reoccur in 5 years if you're lucky. Next, trust. Artificial intelligence is that people trust. So I'm going to show you one picture which really tells a whole story. Again, you just have to look at that red and blue curve, and I will quickly explain. There is a trade-off when it comes to how much privacy you put into your system versus how effective it can be. This picture is from studies of using warfarin in a serious disease situation where the folks working on the project needed to experiment to figure out what kind of dosages to apply to what kinds of people. And in a careful analysis of the costs of privacy, the statisticians were able to show that if you increase your privacy budget, so you make less information available to your AIs, there's a cost because it takes many more patients and much more information before you can reach specific decisions. And so there is a trade-off between the amount of privacy and the, in this case, human lives, where sacrificing privacy gains you help on human lives. That sounds kind of scary, and the wrong conclusion to draw from that is to throw away privacy. The right conclusion is a huge push towards policies and technological approaches which involve things like clever use of cryptography and extremely careful use of marshalling your data in such a way that you can prove that no human ever looks at it. Those kinds of approaches can allow you to get the best of both worlds, or at the very least, shift these scary curves so that you're able to do more. For example, one of our current really surprisingly useful products is something which helps scan official documents to do identity verification for all kinds of uses, like taking out a bank loan, for example. Can you imagine training an AI on millions and millions of people's personal identifiers, like their passports and their driver's licenses? No one would want to collect that data for the purposes of training an artificial intelligence. What we've been able to do instead is use the power of computer science to generate vast numbers of synthetic images, simulating every kind of problem that can happen as you're using a system, and then using that synthetic data to make a classifier which we are comfortable right now has at least 10 times the power of accurate validation than we had ever had before. So these tricks for privacy, including, for those of you familiar with the concept, customer managed encryption keys, which means data stored on a cloud in such a way that the providers of the cloud cannot access the data themselves, that only the end user can use, are really important. Next, I want to talk about life after launch. This is something which I learned a huge amount about myself through experience. As in my earlier careers, we built systems for disease surveillance, for advertising targeting, for defending against spam. In each of these cases, as we built up a team of AI experts to discover the machine learning model, be it a neural network or a decision tree or a big Bayesian network, as we built those up, we kind of sat back once we had something which was accurate enough to solve the problem, sort of breathed a sigh of relief and implemented, pressed go on putting this stuff into deployment. But in every single occasion, I ended up building a much larger team to do all the monitoring and improvement and ability to run new experiments for this machine learning system as it was carrying on through its life. For instance, of course, as you can imagine, in something like detecting fraud or spam, you actually have to have a machine learning system which is constantly guarding against adversarial attacks. But in other cases, and certainly, for heaven's sake, anything which is safety critical, you need to be monitoring all the time to make sure that your machine learning system has not started to hallucinate an effect, or, and this one is really serious, get the causal nature of this thing implies that thing wrong. And so this is a model which we have sitting up in our walls in Google, and of course nowadays on post-it notes around all our desks, to do with the design of a machine learning platform is certainly there to support the initial data science geniuses who are coming up with those models in the first place, but most of it goes into making sure that you've got something which is running securely. You're able to understand and identify a problem if it starts to behave strangely, or one of your customers is complaining that something really weird has happened. You have to have the diagnosis tools for that. And then you also need a platform where everyone in your organization can ask the question, hey, would this thing be working better if it could also detect, say, the weather? Or would the AI be helped if we made sure that we were filtering out the effects of this very volatile variable? And people can ask those questions and you can experiment to find out if it helps. And then you can do a safe launch to launch a new, better version of the machine learning model. So I think this is probably something which I would regard as a key thing to remember in all of this. When you're about to run an AI system, or you're in charge of an AI project, most of your thinking right from the start should be what you're going to do after it's been launched. And that exciting time before it's been launched is important, but being able to operationalize that machine learning system afterwards is even more important. Finally, this question of AI for everyone. We computer scientists are sort of notorious for taking professions, figuring out parts of those professions which computers can do better and making that happen. Here's ironic and good news. We've done it to ourselves. So when it comes to all the messy work needed to figure out how to mess with your data in order to get the most accurate model, or choose which kind of machine learning method to use, or to automatically figure out which variants of a machine learning model to use, or what information to pay attention to or ignore, all of that stuff which is the manual daily life of a data scientist, we can provide additional tools to actually create an autonomous computer replica of a data scientist. This kind of system is called an AutoML, and the idea is that here, someone who's doing an important thing in an organization who needs to train up a system to do something should be able to, if they can't afford or they don't have access to their own data scientists, should be able to build stuff themselves. And I encourage everyone to play with these things because they're really fun and they do take away the grungy work. I want to give an example now, which I think is a perfect case study of someone doing something interesting and useful without having access to machine learning experts themselves and what comes out of it.
The main challenges facing wildlife today is habitat loss, climate change, and threats from the illegal wildlife trade. ZSL's mission is to create a world where wildlife thrives. We work in over 50 countries around the world where we empower and inform people to help stop wild animals going extinct. We have been working with Google to look at how we can use Cloud AutoML to really make a difference.
We use camera traps to monitor the state of the planet. They are tiny little digital cameras hooked up to a little motion sensor, basically. So when an animal walks past, they snap a little photo, which you can then retrieve at a later time. As well as telling you about how abundant different species are, they can also offer behavioral insights as well.
One camera trap study generates hundreds of thousands of images. So over 6 months, you might get 500,000 images that you need to sort through and analyze.
You've got to go through every single image. You've got to label them, the time, the date, what it contained, which camera it was. At the moment, it takes months.
If we can speed up the analysis from 6 months to just days, that's revolutionary in our conservation efforts. Google Cloud AutoML allows conservationists who are non-coders to use machine learning to create image recognition models to identify species in camera trap images.
These are images that I have labelled, and they're going to teach the AutoML algorithm what different species look like.
If you can just AutoML it, you could go, show me the images that are empty, show me the images that have the animal that I'm interested in. You can actually use your scientific research and conservation time to do conservation rather than doing data analysis.
We might use the data to actually influence policy change or conservation action. AI is going to play a really big part in collecting all the data together from wildlife conservation sites around the world. And if we do that in real time, we can use AutoML to really monitor the pulse of wildlife across the planet.
So that's it. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about these passions in my life and things which I think are critical for anyone who's going to be responsible for artificial intelligence. Bottom line, product management techniques to make sure you're bringing in the humans and the organizational dynamics, trust, making sure that you can set up your system so you're not violating users' reasonable expectations of privacy while you're using your AIs. The real importance of ML operations. Use a platform which helps you develop a great machine learning system, but then maintain it and keep it healthy for the rest of its life. And then finally, this real call to action that you do not have to have some fancy PhD to use machine learning or to build AIs anymore. We're now in a world where I expect creative subject matter experts to be able to build their own AIs. So with that, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Greetings, everyone. It's an honor to join you on behalf of USDA and Secretary Perdue today, albeit virtually, to discuss just how exciting a time it is in agriculture right now. Indeed, we're in a true technology and innovation renaissance within agriculture. Did you know that agriculture production has increased 400% with 10% less land over the past 90 years? Did you know that agriculture in 2020 uses the same level of input that it did in 1930 to achieve the 400% increase? And did you know that the average lifespan of Americans has gone from 49 to over 80 years in that same time frame? The length and quality of life for Americans is a direct response to having safe, abundant, and affordable food. Innovation is the reason for that. Agriculture has introduced many new ideas to farmers and has created new solutions for consumers, like using remote sensing from satellites to plan precision irrigation of crops or monitor drought from space. Albert Einstein famously told us we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. Success often comes from finding the big idea that tackles problems and changes the way we do things. Consider the way we watch movies today. In 1997, we evolved from VHS to DVD in favor of greater storage capacity and improved picture quality and sound. Then in 2005, we were introduced to streaming movies on demand, and the pandemic may have further accelerated this migration and made it permanent. Similarly, USDA scientists revolutionized American agriculture in the past 50 years, pioneering technological advancements including the use of artificial intelligence and research labs, satellite technologies, and precision techniques on the farm. But despite our past successes, we don't rest on our laurels. We challenge ourselves to discover the next bold, intentional disruption in agriculture. Routinely, USDA researchers ask themselves, how can we solve this problem? Is there a better way to do this, or what if? Our in-house scientists at the Agriculture Research Service, or ARS as we call it, seek to strategically disrupt commonly held assumptions to ignite agricultural innovation. ARS is a national treasure, with research locations across the country that are committed to using big data and AI to help our ranchers keep their animals healthy and farmers to grow safe, nutritious crops. From developing a livestock heat stress map, which is available online, to collaborating with the private sector to construct the first self-propelled apple harvesting and field scouting prototype machine, ARS scientists are using sound research and computing power to generate better outcomes for farmers and consumers. We're also partnering with university scientists to develop environmentally sustainable tools and practices, including designing agriculture robots, devising instruments for crop and soil monitoring, and developing predictive analytics. For example, ARS and university scientists developed a new laser-guided spraying system for orchard crops that controls spray outputs to match targeted tree structures, minimizing pesticide use and off-target effects of those pesticides. Our citizens should never fear their food. USDA is the only federal agency playing the dual role in protecting agriculture and public health from farm to fork to ensure a safe, nutritious, and secure food supply. The National Institute of Food and Agriculture, also known as NIFA, invests in funding for artificial intelligence research, education, and extension to ensure the safety and quality of our agricultural products. They've been leaders in this regard. A good example is the recent NIFA-funded project with scientists at the University of Kentucky using unmanned aerial vehicles, or drones, to non-invasively monitor cattle health. Herd loss costs the cattle industry more than $1 billion each year, with nearly 3 million cows in the U.S. dying from health issues and problems. By using drones to remotely and autonomously check on the location and health of each cow, farmers will be able to address cattle health and safety issues much sooner. NIFA-funded researchers at Florida International University are also developing an artificial intelligence machine learning system that can help predict the likelihood of mycotoxin risk based on various climatic, pre-harvest, and post-harvest crop factors. Mycotoxins, as you may know, are produced by fungi that grow on many fruits, cereals, and nuts and can cause severe illness and disease in both humans and animals, and result in losses of approximately $1 billion per year in the United States. USDA scientists are also using new technologies to evaluate data. Our economists within the Economic Research Service, or ERS, are using machine learning both for augmenting traditional research methods and advanced predictive modeling tools for crop yield prediction from weather data. Combining classical statistical models with deep learning neural networks, these methods predict crop yields over large scales more accurately than any other published approach. And at the National Ag Statistics Service, or NASS, surveyors are increasing efficiency using artificial intelligence software to evaluate multiple survey estimates, edit survey data, and access spatial and environmental data to help us understand and assess the impact of hurricanes and other weather events, as well as many other uses. These are just a few examples of how USDA science agencies are working together to deliver a novel approach to producing data-driven results using artificial intelligence, machine learning, and other innovative tools to propel American agriculture. But we can't stop there. There's more to do and more to discover. We must build on our rich legacy of innovation. Our recently launched USDA Science Blueprint outlines our needed capabilities and science priorities for the next 5 years and beyond. The blueprint helps coordinate USDA science initiatives in 5 overarching program themes. Sustainable ag intensification, which is essentially doing more with less, continuing that slope and continuing that line of productivity without having a deleterious effect on our soil, water, and air. New approaches such as regenerative agriculture, fueled by digital and precision, can help in this regard. A second key theme is ag climate adaptation, to ensure that as we attempt to mitigate impacts of greenhouse gases, we also have an eye on adapting as well, to make sure that our crops can deal with the new conditions, that they're prepared for it, as well as our animals in agriculture. Food and nutrition translation, to embrace the new paradigm of precision nutrition, where an individual's DNA is actually linked up with what we know about the impact of foods on chronic diseases and individual susceptibility to chronic diseases. Such an exciting field. Ag science policy leadership surrounds everything and ensures that we are always using data-based approaches and evidence-based approaches to set policies. Science policies in particular must really respect the evidence-based approach, and we want the U.S. to stand tall in agriculture as always utilizing good science and good evidence for making decisions. And of course, the last theme is value-added innovations, where we are always seeking ways to improve our ability not just to produce but to protect the environment, to make food more affordable and more healthy and more nutritious, to avoid food loss and waste. So these are 5 key themes that we have as capability build within USDA. Each of those themes has established objectives, strategies, and evidence building measures. And as much as the blueprint defines the capabilities to build and kind of defines the next era of agriculture, the USDA Agriculture Innovation Agenda outlines the discovery goals that will accelerate our pace. In this next era of agriculture, we need to accelerate both innovation and technology to keep America's food and fiber supply strong and maintain long-term production capability. When Secretary Perdue announced the USDA Agriculture Innovation Agenda goals in February, he challenged us to create new opportunities to transform U.S. agriculture. The Ag Agenda highlights USDA's goals of increasing U.S. agricultural production by 40% to feed a growing world, while cutting the environmental footprint of U.S. agriculture in half by 2050. These are big goals and big ambitions, and we'll have to think differently on how to get there, but we're up for that challenge. Inclusive in the agenda is creation of U.S. Ag Innovation Strategy, which is a partnership between the public and private sector, we believe, that focuses on 4 innovation clusters. And these 4 innovation clusters were identified through a National Academies of Sciences report that published not too long ago. Genome design, really harnessing the power of gene editing and all the other techniques that are in that space to allow us to not just focus on productivity or traditional uses, but to improve photosynthesis, to develop soil microbiome, for example, that could fix nitrogen to reduce the loss of nitrogen in the soil. So many potential applications, not just to support production, but to support that production capability I've referenced, to support the development and the health of the soil, the air, and the water. Digital and automation. Yes, we've started this journey and we are down the road, but so much more is ahead of us. Consider what would have happened, how the food chain might have been different during the pandemic had we had more automation in our food processing plants. And so much more opportunity for automation in harvesting and in planting and in all of the things that allow agriculture to be so efficient today. Prescriptive intervention, learning from the past, the big data, learning from all that we know about the soil and the environment in the past, what we know in the present, and really predicting and intervening as we go, whether it's seed density, whether it's seed type, whether it's animal breed, whether it's pest control, so many opportunities for prescriptive intervention. And systems-based management, which really ties it all together. You know, in agriculture, many of our biggest innovations have really been adopted and embraced because they have reduced complexity in a very complex system. Now, with these opportunities in digital automation, prescriptive intervention, and genomics, we have the opportunity to embrace that complexity because we can make the interface such that the farmer and the rancher can utilize that, adapt it to their business goals and operational goals, and move forward with that complexity as opposed to trying to simplify or reduce complexity. Those 4 innovation clusters are so exciting and give so much hope and potential for the next era of agriculture. So make no mistake, USDA is investing in innovation, and it has been the driver of our success and will continue to be our focus. The USDA emblem on our flag says, agriculture is the foundation of manufacture and commerce. And now we could add high technology. As agriculture has become efficient, the U.S. now only requires 2% of our citizenry to produce our food. This opens up everything and has been the reason the U.S. is a global economic leader. But our current mantra from Secretary Perdue is do right and feed everyone, which describes our motivation to even further innovate and transform agriculture and our food systems. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's activities, and I wish you all the very best in the program. Thank you.
Hi, welcome back, and thanks to everybody joining us today. I'm FedScoop Editor-in-Chief Billy Mitchell, and it's my great pleasure today to speak with Cheryl Ingstad, Director of Artificial Intelligence and Technology Office at the Department of Energy, and Tony Towns-Whitley, who is the President of U.S. Regulated Industries for Microsoft. Cheryl, Tony, it's great to have you guys. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So we have a lot of ground to cover today. Artificial intelligence is a big topic in the federal government, and particularly interested because I know both of you are sort of on the cutting edge of this. Cheryl within the Department of Energy supporting the AITO, and then Tony with Microsoft as a major partner for the federal government adopting this technology. So, but today let's start with the current event that is sort of on all of our minds, COVID-19. There's a lot of lessons to come out of this over the past 7 to 8 months, particularly around adopting AI. So I'd love to hear, what have federal agencies or, supporting partners in the private sector learned in how AI can support the federal mission for things like continuity, triage, things like that. So maybe we'll start from an inside perspective of government and go to you, Cheryl.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you for asking. So one thing I'm very proud of is that the Department of Energy, which I call the R&D backbone of our country, the 17 national labs spread out across the country pitched in right away. I mean, they just jumped in with their R&D assets and just turned to, how can we help solve the COVID problem? And so just initially a lot of great results there. But then we also very quickly started a project which was called COVID Insights. And that's an unprecedented data sharing partnership, which all Americans, I think, would be proud of to say that we are using our federal data to benefit the American people and to try to crack COVID. And the data sets that we're bringing together here are highly valuable from the VA and then from the HHS, and bringing them to Oak Ridge National Laboratory in a secure data enclave. And then we apply the multidisciplinary teams of scientists that we have there, and as well AI. And then we're co-located with the supercomputer, the Summit, which is the nation's fastest supercomputer. So it's really bringing all the capabilities together to conduct cutting edge research on COVID.
Great. And Tony, from Microsoft perspective, how have you guys worked with agencies and seen agencies adopt AI during this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's to the point that Cheryl makes, it's been phenomenal to see the role that technology has played over the last 8 months, and particularly data and AI, where we've probably had our greatest learnings. And some of that is a function of working not only in the federal government, for the state and local governments in the healthcare space, and for myself in the financial services, is the role that AI has played. We started with CDC in helping using our AI frameworks to create these bots that were used for triage, because we found our clinicians were being pulled away from medical intervention for patients in triaging information. And then the bot framework just took off as a way to, if you will, triage the many, many signals and requests for information and data and collated data to help us understood during that time frame where the contagion was actually occurring. And from there, we started to work across health providers, even in the commercial space, that were leveraging the work of CDC, of Johns Hopkins University, and others. So we've seen AI as a triage capability that was allowing, if you will, the direct intervention for the medical care that has been needed and obviously continues to be needed through the pandemic. But more broadly, we found ourselves doing self-assessment bots for New York State through Governor Cuomo's work on the tech squad. We found ourselves working with Department of Defense across all 4 million employees in DoD on our collaboration platforms to use AI to start to actually find where agencies needed to make decisions the most quickly, using the big data capability and analytics to determine where the issues, the root cause issues were around the pandemic. And it continues to be in use today. And so I think we've all learned that it's AI, the tech is absolutely important, and the solutions that come. But if I could just make one last insight, was that it really went beyond just the tech. We started to find out about people and the need for digital skilling and building fluency and mastery around the AI tools. And we really put a lot of effort there, as I know Cheryl and Department of Energy did as well. We learned that policies needed to be re-examined, like the Trusted Internet certificates and the various programs that exist, and mandates that have been in place for many, many years needed to be re-examined during a crisis environment to allow for more modern technology to be deployed. And so it's people, it's policy, it's tech, it's never one answer is probably our biggest finding.
That's great. And I think you read my mind a little bit, because the next place I wanted to take the conversation was that skills element in the workforce. AI is great and tech is great, but as you just said, you can't just force it in there if people don't know how to use it. It's not a winning equation. So I would like to talk about how agencies can, agencies that do want to adopt AI can think about the workforce and skilling their departments and in the workforce for the emergence of AI. And then, maybe alternatively, there's also the opportunity that once AI is adopted, it can make things easier for the people who aren't skilled in those things by lowering the bar down for things like low or no code solutions. So Tony, maybe since you mentioned skills, we'll start with you this time.
Well, look, this is very close to the passion of Microsoft from its beginning as a company. This idea of democratizing technology was around getting the digital fluency to a level where we would say we almost had citizen developers, that you could engage in technology at any level, at any background. And so we announced, as you know, a 25 million American focused digital skilling program just a few months ago that's bringing all of our learning platforms together to assist getting that skilling out. A few things that we've learned on the skilling side. One is that it's really deeply important that we leverage platforms. For us, we call them power platforms that allow, in a very low code, almost no code environment, people to be able to build applications with very little computer science background or deep digital literacy, and to do that quickly, particularly in a crisis environment. So we found that our power platforms that create power apps has probably been the fastest growing engagement that we've had across federal government and other sectors. Outside of that, it's really important that the digital skilling be used in the existing collaborative platforms, so that you're not creating a new place for people to go, but as part of their daily job, they can learn in scenario how the technology can be adopted and leveraged in their daily sort of work routines, rather than something that feels contrived or somehow extended from their daily work. So we've learned that. And finally, one of the things that was probably the most tragic as we've done work through the last 8 months is to see the digital equity gaps. Probably most poignant for me was watching those gaps across K-12 school districts and higher ed institutions that showed this lack of a digital infrastructure, and it created a very different experience for students, teachers, and parents across this country. And so we've spent a lot of time on what's the broadband requirement to ensure that not only federal workers, but all workers across this country can close the gap on digital access. We know there's 24 million Americans, at least 25, I think, that FCC has recorded, that have no broadband no access, and about 19 million of those in rural areas. So we've been making commitments through our airband commitment that we launched last year to close that gap.
And Cheryl, I know it's something you've been focused on within the AITO as well. Let's hear what you're doing to help educate the masses at Energy on what's to come in AI.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, and we have a lot of passion around it. Just as you heard from Tony, this is an area that I have to tell you, when I first arrived here in February, that I went on my listening tour to talk to key leaders across the entire organization, and I heard so much demand for AI training at all levels. People who already were in the AI professions wanted more training, but particularly, just like Tony was saying, how do we help skill people who don't have that training? A lot of those that don't, and leadership too, said, we want to understand the value of our data. I know we have great data here in our unit and our team, and we don't do as much mining of the data. We would love to have those AI tools, or in the business operations, wow, we would love to apply AI for efficiencies, and so then those things really came out strongly in our strategy, right? But the training part, we've hired up a presidential innovation fellow to come in and lead the training strategy. It's so important for us. And so she's pulling that all together as we speak. But I'll just give you a little insight into what we foresee, which is the first training will be launched here by the end of the year, and driven by one of the labs, one of the 17 labs. And then from there, we will just have a growing number of trainings. So it'll be at a leadership awareness level, which is really critical in government, since they're making a lot of the decisions, that they really understand, as their staffs are explaining what the AI potential is, that they also as a leader understand and have that background. So we're doing those trainings. And then all other levels of, whether it's just from basic awareness, which we would like to do that broadly for the entire department, so that we can create a transformation here. And then the technical skills. So what is, your entry level, intermediate, advanced, in different specialties of AI. So we are looking forward to pulling all of that training together and launching it as a full strategy with executable parts in the future.
That's very exciting. And you mentioned the data piece, and we've heard plenty before that, data is key with AI and machine learning and automated technologies. But expanding that, I'd be curious to hear, what sort of, I position them as challenges, but maybe hurdles that people or things people need to get in order as they're thinking about this journey to AI. What sort of things preclude the adoption of AI? Thinking of, again, the data and the data sharing, or Tony, you mentioned platforms, things like that need to be in place before AI can be effective across the federal space. So Cheryl, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, actually, that's another major part of our strategy, which is really about how can we identify the most critical data sets, and who the user group should be, and apply the right security, and then whether it's through a platform or some other way, make it available. How do we make the right data available with the appropriate security to the users who can really benefit from that? And that is also something that I heard routinely when I went around in my first visits here. So that's something that we're really busy starting down the path on. And another one is similar to it. Not only how do we make the data, these critical data sets available, but the data models as well. So and then that gets to a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is adversarial AI too. How do we, as we do that, and I say ensure the security, but it's not only security once you're on the platform, it's looking at the provenance of these data, before you take them into your system, and having a clear understanding of what's been changed by whom, And was that authorized? And maybe even using AI to check those data sets, And the same thing for the model, asking all the right questions, like what data sets were these models trained on, and having an additional, basically a checklist of information, basically a certificate that comes with it and explains its background. Maybe it's like its health record or whatever. And then you can, and then the users can really better understand what they have. But certainly making AI models and data sets available to a broader amount of our researchers and users across DOE.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sorry. I get so excited when I hear what Cheryl has said there, because she's going down a path and she's actually demonstrated this in her leadership. We're very proud of the work she's doing at the Department of Energy. But, we've already talked about, you said sort of what are the inhibitors? We talked about skilling, that just the fluency of knowing how to deal with tools around AI and those types of technology solutions. Cheryl brings up data sets, making them available, accessible, being able to identify the source of those data sets. And as she starts to talk about adversarial AI, this understanding of the platform and the security that has to be in place for us to talk about cognitive capability and the leverage of AI. It involves the adoption of cloud. Cloud technology is really one of the key infrastructures that needs to be in place to really understand how to leverage AI left to right. And we see that adoption growing faster and accelerating across the federal government. One of the major concerns around cloud has been security. And it's been interesting. We're almost seeing this shift in the definition of security. Is what does security look like in motion in a crisis? Well, it looks like resiliency. And now we're starting to see this amazing uptick around zero trust architecture, was the shift from securing the perimeter to identity, leveraging identity and access, and being able to lock down the sourcing of data and the sourcing of the humans who have the interaction with that data, and to be able to put a coherent system in place. This zero trust that assumes no trust, that assumes no security, and you have to prove your quite frankly, your need to know or your reason for the data access. That's a shift in how security has been managed in the federal government for many, many years. And it's shifting the dialogue from chief information security officers are saying not just no, or we can't do this now, but how do we shift in this environment? So platform matters, having a robust platform. We invest $17 billion. We've invested as a company in securing the platform for our customers. And our peers are doing the same kinds of investments because it's critical. It's critical to be able to use these AI tools in a secure environment. When you start talking about healthcare, I love that Cheryl mentions maybe you almost need an electronic health record type audit trail for the data elements. Can you label these data elements and understand their source? And that's the kind of investment that big tech, I think, is attempting to make, so that we can give you that attestation that the data, the platform that data rests on, is in fact secure and robust.
That's great. One of the topics we're hearing a lot about as more and more departments and agencies across the government adopt AI is really injecting ethics into that AI. I know that both of you in particular work either within AITO, moving to adopt some principles for ethics, or Microsoft and its committee, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, really thinking about ethics and making sure it's at the core of everything when it comes to AI. So I'd love to discuss the need for ethics and how that works. Maybe we'll start with you, Tony, and you can tell me if I pronounced that correctly or not.
I thought you gave it a good try there. So it's actually pronounced ether, but we make it hard for folks. It's not phonetic. So I apologize for that as a former English teacher. But really, the Ether Committee for Microsoft is a set of committees. I have had the pleasure and honor of sitting on the Sensitive Use Committee for almost since its inception 4 years ago. But this is a set of committees that looks at a principled way with basically 6 key principles of how we design technology, how we deploy technology when we choose not to deploy or design against a specific requirement, and how we help educate our customers almost in a warranty-like fashion of what have you, do you know what you've adopted, and do you know how it was intended to be used, and how do we ensure that the intended use matches the actual use so that that technology is at its highest efficacy and cannot then be used for, if you will, infringement of human rights or denial to services. And so on the Sensitive Use Committee, we literally look at cases from around the world, and particularly in government, relative to the use of AI, and we're expanding our body of knowledge of understanding how to use a framework. We have an interdisciplinary team of literally philosophers and ethicists, lawyers and technologists, engineers and researchers that come together literally on a weekly basis to review what we'll call the inductive unknowns, when we're moving inductively in the design and we don't know what's around the corner. And AI introduces inductive unknowns. Getting comfortable there is generally pretty hard for engineers, but that's why we go an interdisciplinary effort. We've had this framework that we've spoken to across Department of Defense, across many civilian agencies, literally the Home Office of the UK, which is their sort of OMB, if you will, for the UK, adopted this framework in looking at ethics and how to, if you will, deploy AI in an ethical framework. So we're excited about the work at Energy, but we feel like there's no way to talk about AI without a coupling of a systematic ethical framework and decision-making process that has to be in place.
And Cheryl, tell us about what Energy is doing.
Yes, so interesting what Tony was just explaining. So we're at the start the beginning of that journey of identifying ethical principles. We're looking at, of course, the DoD and the intelligence community has put out very, very impressive work there. We are connecting in with the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center at DoD and learning from their journey on ethical principles and how they're executing on them, because it's really a great thing to produce those principles and publicize them and really do all of the public relations work to get it out and the awareness in the organization. But then it's the next level that really matters, which is, well, how do you turn that into policies that people can really follow, like a prescription to follow, if you will. So we're looking at it from that perspective, but just starting on that journey.
That's great. And we have a minute or two left. So I want to close out. I know that both the Department of Energy and Microsoft are part of something that's called the First Five Consortium. So I'd love to hear about that, what that is, and sort of what it's achieving so far. I know it's relatively new, but I'd love to get an update on how that's going. Cheryl and then Tony to wrap us up.
Well, super. This is just a really exciting project, and it's one of the two that we've launched with our new office since arrival in February. We had launched the COVID Insights that I mentioned, and then the First Five. And the First Five is a consortium, and we co-chair it with Microsoft. So really happy to say that. We have about 14 members right now, and it's all about getting AI tools into the hands of first responders. And considering the problems that we're having with the fires and the floods right now, CAL FIRE is one of the members of the consortium, and we're creating those tools right now to turn video feed as quickly as possible into a map of the fire line. So really going well. I just had a briefing today, and then I also maintain a close relationship with the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center at DoD on this, and also with our co-chairs in Microsoft.
Great. And Tony, wrap us up.
We could go all day on this one. We're so proud of being part of this in coordination with Cheryl's organization. But the name First Five is a little bit intriguing to people. So let's just talk. The first 5 minutes of any disaster we found to be so critical in the diagnostics of getting to root cause and understanding the directions and how to actually intervene. And so we're using the AI as a way of, if you will, putting that first line of defense in place. And that is really what is driving this sort of First Five capability. So it really has organizations like Microsoft within my team, particularly charged on the precision data analytics that can be so critical in the early part of a crisis. And so we're thrilled to be part of the partnership. And I think there's a lot more to come about what we learn and how we are able to intervene across various situations across this country.
That's great, and it's a great story and a great application of how important AI can be in our nation. So that's it. That's all we have time for. I think we even went a little extra, but I think we could talk about this all day, but that's fine. But once again, Cheryl Ingstad, Tony Towns-Whitley, thank you both so much. This has been a tremendous conversation, and it really opened some eyes into what both of you are doing. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Billy. Good to see you, Cheryl.
Well, nice to see you, Tony. Bye-bye.
Hello, we're excited to have you join us today at FedTalks. I'm Dave Nazepper, and I'm a tech reporter at FedScoop. Joining me today are Keith Nakasone, Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Acquisition in the Office of IT category, and Ryan Day, Director of the Digital Services Division, both within the General Services Administration. GSA has spent much of 2020 expanding the impact of AI on the federal government this year. A key part of that effort is assisting agencies with the acquisition of innovative technologies. To that end, I was hoping you could start out by explaining the Enterprise User Licensing Agreement and how it leverages AI. Keith.
Great, thanks for having us. To start, an end user license agreement, what we call EULAs, details the rights and restrictions which apply to the use of software or services. It can be also known as software licensing agreements or acceptable use policy. As part of the acquisition process of software or services, GSA reviews the associated EULAs. This review must be completed and approved prior to awarding new contracts or modifying existing contracts. As a GSA contracting officer reviews the applicable EULAs for terms and conditions that are not in accordance with the federal law and regulations. The CO may also coordinate a legal review with the Office of General Counsel if they feel it is warranted. Should EULAs contain language that would conflict with federal law and regulations, the CO will negotiate changes to the EULA to remove the problematic language. On average, it takes all parties involved approximately 7 to 14 days to review a EULA and ensure that all unacceptable terms and conditions are identified. We targeted this as a candidate to apply AI or machine learning to this manual process, and we organized an online challenge on the challenge.gov platform to get solutions from the public. And that's the way we started this effort to ensure that we wanted to test and actually see the commercial practices that was available to take on this effort.
Now, Ryan, I was curious to get your take on what were some of the things GSA learned from industry during that process and themes it maybe hadn't considered before that it's considering now.
Yeah, thanks. The first thing we learned was that industry could actually do this. Our use case going in, we didn't have any assumptions whether or not that it could be done with machine learning or not, but we found that it was a good fit. As we organized the challenge, one of the possible outcomes we thought of might be that nobody would submit a solution, or maybe we'd have a few solutions, but they wouldn't be of very high quality. But in the end, for this challenge, we got 20 solutions that were submitted, some of them very detailed, very high quality. And so that was really validating. And then in the deep dive, one of the interesting things about this use case is that we don't have very much training data. So a lot of times in machine learning, supervised machine learning, you want to have large amounts of data. We only had, really thousands of rows of training data. So we asked teams to see what kind of creative solutions that they could do to solve this. In particular, looking at transfer learning or other techniques like this. And what was really interesting is we found that there's been several advances even in the last couple of years in natural language processing that directly address dealing with limited training data. And specifically what we found is there's very powerful pre-trained machine learning models that are being provided, open source that people are using in the industry that allows you to take, the power of a model from this pre-training on vast amounts of other data and then only having to fine tune it for your individual data. And so in our challenge, when we went through those 20 solutions, we found it was very prevalent. Many of those teams were using a pre-trained model called BERT, or one of the variations off of BERT, that's B-E-R-T. And that was a very technique that we saw over and over again that allowed them to deal with that problem of limited training data. And that was really eye-opening for us. And really, as it relates to crowdsourcing challenges like this, it really validated for us, if you want to go to industry and find out what is the state of the art, what is today's latest techniques, as opposed to last year's, this was very powerful to us that we saw that and saw that repeated themes. Then a couple other things, again, with that lack of training data, we saw a couple of creative ways to augment training data and generate new training data. One that we thought was really interesting was one of the teams proposed taking the training in our case, which was a clause or a couple of paragraphs or two that we're asking them to tell the question, is this acceptable to government or not? Because that's really that binary classification task that we had. Some teams proposed taking those clauses from English, using a cloud translation tool to translate it to possibly hundreds of other languages, and then translate it back into English. And in that, you would come back with another set of those clauses that was not the same as the original, but had the same semantic meaning, maybe different types of syntax, and as a way of generating that one. And the last thing, just quickly we got is that the teams, as they developed their solutions, they used an API-centric approach, meaning in almost every case, the inference engine, the modeling prediction engine, was deployed as an API. That definitely confirmed for us the value, kind of flexibility that API-centric model gives you. So that's it. That's just a couple of them off the top.
Now, what insights can you share into compiling and staging data for AI and ML projects?
Yeah, that was interesting. In data science, they have what you call the 80-20 rule, meaning about 80% of the work of doing a machine learning solution is in the data wrangling, data cleansing, data preparation. And so by doing an end-to-end challenge like this, we really validated that was certainly the case. So, in this challenge, we were playing the part of doing all of that data preparation. And then that last 20%, we were turning over to the solvers to have a solution. And so we found that the process of generating data for this was extremely manual, very time intensive. As we went, we came up with some automation techniques through scripting and things like this that helped us a little bit. But what was really great is the solvers themselves, whenever they submitted their solutions, provided a lot of different techniques for parsing documents from MS Word or a PDF, and then breaking it down into clauses that predictions can be done on. And so all of those techniques that they gave to us in their solutions, we'll be able to use those in the future for our training data preparation.
Keith, what other advice would you give to agencies just beginning AI ML projects when it comes to things like scope creep and explainability?
Thanks for the question. One of the things that we want to focus on from an acquisitions perspective is when we start looking at projects that we have a focus on the desired outputs and outcomes and ensuring that it's well defined. We want to make sure that when we scope the contract requirements, that we definitely focus on what we set out to do, because it's very easy for us to say, oh, what if we did this and what if we did that, and we added additional requirements, and it could complicate the matters when you're pursuing something with this technology and the tool set. So if we create the focus and we create the acquisition to move forward in an agile way, so we can do iterative process in building, we can make go, no-go decisions along the way. So for the example, like the challenge, it really tests the water to say, hey, what is that capability out there in industry? And then we can move into proof of concepts, pilots, and then scale and production, and build the acquisitions accordingly. But really the importance here is to avoid that scope creep, because it could get costly in the long run. But this agile iterative approach, we can phase it in and we can see what works, what doesn't work, and make adjustments accordingly. So definitely when we're taking on emerging technologies, iterative process is the way to go.
Now, do you guys anticipate any challenges like this in the future? How do you build off this?
From the good thing about taking on something like this from a challenge perspective is we can actually see the opportunities that are available. So with all the different sources or the solution sets that came in, we can determine what was the best solution, what worked, what didn't work, and we can actually move some of the things that we learned into actual requirements from a business perspective as well as a technology perspective. So I think this is a good way to start. The challenge gave us some really good insight into the tools available. I don't know if Ryan wanted to offer a little bit more from the technical perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely hope to do some more. That it's interesting whenever you get solutions like this, the work that they give you gives you a lot of other ideas for things that you'd like to see industry explore. But definitely we've had several of our solvers getting in touch with us even as late as today asking, when's the next one? We want to get in on that. So we just felt really positively about the interaction we had with the solver community through it. So definitely interested in that in the future.
Another subject I wanted to touch on with you two was the idea of ethical AI standards. The Department of Defense, intelligence community, and now Department of Homeland Security are all working on ethical AI standards. I was wondering if we can expect something similar from GSA, or is the agency taking a different approach?
No, absolutely. One of the things that we're doing, GSA has the community of practice, and Steve Babbage leads that effort for us there. But it brings the agencies together so we can learn best practices, we can share information, and also glean what we can do from creating templates and playbooks. So this is a great way for us to move in the future, is leveraging that community of practice, understanding what everybody else is doing from an agency perspective, and from the Center of Excellence approach, is we can start to build out those proof of concepts, get to minimum viable products and solutions, and then move eventually into product and scale. But one of the things that we also are considering is leveraging commercial off the shelf, and companies that are putting ethical principles out there for us to leverage is also another thing that we can consider from a contract and acquisition perspective. Ryan, did you have anything else to add for that?
Yeah, I think, just to echo what he said, our approach is to be engaged with the rest of government. The communities of practice and centers of excellence that GSA has, I think, is just the best place at this point where government is talking to each other on those. So, we definitely want to be in learning from the others and continue to be part of that conversation.
Now we've covered a lot of ground, but I did want to get maybe your final thoughts on AI at GSA, anything we haven't touched on that you guys really want to get out there.
Just from an emerging technologies perspective, within the IT category perspective, we're definitely are looking at the products and service offerings that are coming out, and from what private industry is building. And we want to incorporate it within our portfolio offerings as well. So as technology progresses, as things start to move into that production and scale perspective, we really want to include it within our portfolio offerings, such as the new contracts that are government-wide contracts that are becoming available. STARS 3, Polaris are just a couple of the large government-wide acquisition contracts that are coming out, and we definitely want to adopt and also profile some of these larger acquisition vehicles to have those emerging technologies available for use as well.
Ryan, I'm going to give you the last word here.
Great. Yeah, I would just say we really look forward to continuing to engage with industry on this one, both to understand what's the state of the art, but but also continue to ask them, the tougher questions about ethical AI, trustworthy AI, explainability, so that we can help to guide, this industry as it emerges in ways that help the American people.
Well, I want to thank you both for your time today and for your insights. And I want to thank the audience for tuning into this session. We hope you enjoy the rest of Fed Talks.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
One reason so many leading technology companies keep coming back to Scoop News Group is the creative work we produce and distribute through our content studio. This year alone, our S&G Content Studio has created and delivered work for more than 50 clients to help them stand out and inform today's top public sector decision makers. Hi, I'm Wyatt Cash, Senior Vice President at Scoop News Group. Our team of market experts, award-winning journalists, and designers can provide your business development teams with a full array of customized, high-impact videos, podcasts, special reports, and disruptive research studies, and more. Let's talk and let us show you how we are helping the world's leading tech companies deliver their messaging with greater impact.
Hi, my name is Hadi Partovi. I'm the founder and CEO of Code.org, and I'm honored to be presenting today to the FedTalks audience. I want to talk about, as we start thinking about the hopefully the end of this pandemic situation and the future reopening of schools, how do we think about how education has changed over the last year, and what is the future going to hold? How, as we think about the digital divide that has been widened in this past year of pandemic, how do we think about narrowing that digital divide, improving opportunity for students, and then the very important role of computer science in not just closing opportunity gaps with the digital divide, but also bringing more creativity to education. Give me a second while I share my screen. And so I want to talk about computer science and how it holds the key to opportunity and creativity in our schools, and the role also that policy and government can play in helping students' outcomes. I want to start with a personal story. This is a story of my childhood. This is myself with my identical twin brother. We grew in Tehran, Iran, and a few years after this photo, our country was, embroiled in an Islamic revolution and a war with the neighboring country of Iraq. So my childhood was very different than most people's. I spent about 5 years where every single night the power would go out, there would be a loud alarm, and we'd all go to the basement and hold our ears for a bombing raid and hope that our home wouldn't get hit. So it was a pretty difficult time to grow up. But my life really changed one day when my parents brought home a magical gift. They brought home a Commodore 64 personal computer, but this was a magical gift because it didn't have any games or apps or software. The magical gift was a book, an introduction to basic computer programming. And so there in the middle of an Islamic revolution and war, thanks to a father who was a physicist and a mother who was a computer scientist, I taught myself computer science and computer programming and learned to code really well. And at a time of, the really difficult surroundings around me, I was able to realize my dreams by what I could create using software. And this really changed the arc of my life. When I came to the United States as an Iranian immigrant, I basically have been living the American dream and tapping into the modern world of opportunity in the digital century. I went to university and studied computer science. I had started my own startup by the time I was 26 years old, and I'm well on my way in terms of surpassing any of my peers, not only in terms of financial fortunes, but really the much more important fortune of being able to start a global nonprofit. But as we think about it, the world of opportunity has been shifting and changing. It's been changing due to globalization and automation, but this pandemic has even accelerated that shift. If you think about technology's impact on our workforce, if you think of people who are in jobs today, those jobs are gradually getting replaced by computing and software, robots, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And that shift is accelerating with things like the pandemic, making it harder for people during this time to be working in close quarters at a time when computers can work in close quarters without any problems. Projections say that over half of all of today's work is going to be automated by the middle of the century. And what are we doing to prepare students and to prepare the future adults for that time? Now, because my hat says code on it and I represent Code.org, people assume that computer science is only about coding and jobs. And in fact, the work in computer science is the largest sector of new jobs. It's the fastest growing and the highest paying sector. And so there's a great story to be told about why we should teach computer science just for the kids who want to become coders and get those jobs. but that's not the full picture. I want to talk about why it's important to teach computer science to every student in every school for a different reason, because computer science makes school better no matter what a student wants to get into as their career. And it does this in 3 different ways. First of all, computer science provides students better preparation for life. If I think about what I studied when I was in school, or what everybody here studied in school, we all learn about how the digestive system works, or how electricity lights a light bulb, or how basic geometry works. And we learn these things not because we want to become future surgeons or electricians or mathematicians. They're part of the basic fundamental understanding of how the world works and things we need to know to be participants in civic society. In the 21st century, it's equally important, or even more important, for students to know what an algorithm is or how the internet works. These are equally impactful in our daily lives, and not knowing about these things, not understanding the basics, are holding back our future citizens from basically participating in the 21st century. Now, besides life preparation, computer science helps schools prepare students for college and career across all education. And this is new research over the last few years that show that students who study computer science outperform. They outperform their peers in reading and writing and math and science exams as early as elementary school. So state standardized tests show that the 3rd graders and 5th graders who studied any degree of computer science using the code.org platform are outperforming already. They outperform in problem solving and executive functioning skills. By high school, they do better in math courses. So the same skill level students equal at math. The ones who study computer science excel at math. And lastly, high school students who study computer science are 17% more likely to enroll in 4-year colleges. 17%. And that's not because the computer science course helps them get into college. And even in college, computer science students, those who study computer science, outperform students of all other STEM fields when it comes to problem solving. And finally, after graduation, students who study computer science also make higher wages. And now get this, people assume therefore that, all right, so this means the math nerds are doing better. The most interesting research that breaks all stereotypes is that language skills are 8 times more likely to predict a student's success in computer science than math skills, which means that English teachers are going to be more likely to be good at computer science than math teachers. It means bilingual Latino students are going to have a leg up when it comes to learning computer programming. This is a stereotype that we've held on to for decades, that computer science is about math, and that's actually just proven to be not true. Which gets me to my 3rd point, which is that computer science is more engaging and fun for students and teachers. This is because of its creativity. It's because as early as elementary school, students can create beautiful art using code, and at the same time, they're learning math concepts like the angles. By middle school, students can, instead of playing games, create their own games, and along the way, learn about physical concepts like gravity. And by high school, they can create apps to then think about how to expand their creativity into changing their daily lives. And speaking about creativity in schools, there are so many amazing stories of what students have done creatively with computer science. Like the story of Dowdy Manigat, a 10th grader from Miami, who thought of making an app for female abuse victims disguised as a menstrual cycle tracker, so they could secretly call for security or for help without placing a phone call. Or Sophie Saujani in Seattle, who decided to make a local app right in March at the beginning of the pandemic, and her app was to help local restaurants basically share their open or closed status. Or these students led by Hannah Burr in Massachusetts, who made an app to help their high school classmates self-diagnose their mental health. Or this app by Spencer Applegate, living in Glasgow, Kentucky, one of the poorest communities in the country, where 1 out of 6 of his classmates are homeless, and his teacher, Larry Correll, challenged him to recreate Tetris, a billion-dollar video game, and he did it at only 100 lines of code. All of us need to think about how school can bring out creativity in students. And when students are creating with computers, they're not just creating code, they're creating art, they're creating user interfaces, they're creating new businesses, they're thinking about entrepreneurship. These are the skills that we need every student to learn to think about a digital world of the 21st century where rote work, manual labor is being automated, memorization is no longer necessary, and what's important isn't how much information you can store in your head, but what you can do with that information. Because of its creativity, students now rank computer science their favorite subject behind only dance, music, and art. In the words of a teacher, I decided to try code.org in my 8th grade class, and I've never ever seen my students so engaged and excited about learning. This is how we should have every teacher talk about every student. And the problem is that our schools today are something that aren't engaging students at the level they should be because we're teaching too much of the curriculum of the past, too much of the courses that were designed hundreds of years ago that don't envision what we need in today's world. Now, the challenge that I've been trying to solve is that most schools don't teach computer science. In the United States, after 8 years of this work, we've grown from 10% of schools teaching computer science to 47%. The majority still don't offer it. Also, if you look at who has access to computer science, the picture is basically the opposite of what it should be. The lower income schools are less likely to teach computer science, which means the students who have the greatest need for access to opportunity, the ones who need to have a ladder that helps them get to a better level of life, are also not given one. Now, this is a problem that we can change, and it's a problem that we are steadily changing, and all of these numbers are better than they used to be. In fact, on code.org, there's now 15 million students with accounts, and almost half of them are young women. Half of them come from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups, and almost half are students who are too poor to buy their own lunch, and yet they're learning computer science. And these students have collectively created over 100 million projects, showing the importance of creativity in education. Now, this isn't just the work of code.org, this is part of a global movement. And what's happened in the last 7 years in the United States, every state has established some sort of policy to support the expansion of K through 12 computer science. Over 250 million in federal and state funding has been allocated for this field, and over 100,000 new teachers have been prepared to become computer science teachers. And globally, over 50 countries have announced plans. Over 1 million teachers have introduced computer science to their classroom. And the Hour of Code, this fun 1-hour idea we came up with to basically engage students in classrooms with coding and computer science, has surpassed 1 billion engagements. This is thanks to a global movement powered by teachers. It started with individuals like Juan Lonzano in South Seattle, just near where I live, who began teaching computer science in his own classroom and then recruited his whole school to participate. Soon, the entire district had established a computer science plan, and as districts around the country began teaching computer science, states started taking notice, and every state has changed policies. And this, as an American-led movement, has now impacted 50 different countries who are rolling out computer science plans. It's an incredible story of how teachers and educators can build a movement to create opportunity for students. And still, most schools don't teach computer science. Now, 2020 is going to be a big year in so many different ways because of the pandemic and the digital divide. And one of the things that we need to think about is how 2020 is going to change education. And what are we going to do for these students that, because of this pandemic, are seeing a widening digital divide, a widening opportunity gap? How do we give the neediest students the opportunity to get further in life? And because of this, computer science itself is at an inflection point, because computer science holds the key to solve many of the problems we think about. We need to reframe what this is about. Computer science isn't just about coding, it's about creativity and collaboration and opportunity. It's also not just about tech jobs. Computer science has become a foundational part of basic education that every child will need for success in the 21st century. And this brings me to perhaps the most important point in my talk. We need to reframe computer science to show that this is a field that is about solving global problems. At a time of a global pandemic, computer science holds the key to drug discovery and personalized medicine. At a time when democracy is suffering from a pandemic of misinformation, computer science holds the key to identifying fake news or moderating dialogue on social networks. At a time when racism and xenophobia are coinciding with a global economic recession, computer science holds the key to opportunity. and teaching computer science equitably can build bridges across populations. When I learned computer science, the class was around calculating numbers like the Fibonacci sequence or about calculating factorials. When Mark Zuckerberg learned computer science, the latest thing was about sharing information on the internet. We need to shift computer science class to be about curing diseases, cleaning oceans, aiming for gender and race equality, and addressing global poverty. These are some of the largest problems of our time, and our youngest generation are going to be the ones solving these problems, and they are going to be solving these problems using technology so long as we democratize access and the learning of how that technology works and how to create the technology themselves. This brings me to my final point, which is that computer science is about community. When I started code.org, the community of computer science educators was thousands of teachers who were very passionate, and it was a small, tight-knit community. And this community has now grown to over 1 million teachers, and it's still a movement that is still early, that has 10x or 100x growth in it. This movement is around what individual educators, teachers, parents, policymakers, and champions have pushed behind about the opportunity and the idea that every student should have access to computer science. This brings me to back to my personal story. When I came to the United States as an immigrant, there was a lot of things that I didn't have going my way. My family had no money. I was learning a new language. I was learning a new culture, and just trying to make friends was difficult. I didn't even know how to dress up for my first day of school. But what I had going for me was a very strong understanding of computer science and coding, and that helped me surpass all of my peers in terms of my later life, in terms of where it took my career. If you think about the kids all around the country and all around the world who need opportunity the most, what is the course and what is the background that our schools can provide them to help them get ahead in life? And the answer is every student should have access, at least the opportunity to learn computer science as part of school. And this is change that is happening. My story is linked to the story of Araceli Casillas in South Seattle. She's also an immigrant, and she's the first student from her family to go to university. She studied computer science thanks to code.org in high school, and now she's at the University of Washington, one of the top computer science programs in the country. Or Spencer Applegate, who we spoke about from the low-income neighborhood where so many of his fellow classmates are homeless, is now studying computer science in college thanks to the course that he took in high school. Or this young lady, Katie Clemens from Missouri, who wrote an app to help her friends self-diagnose their mental illness, and is now pursuing her interests in technology. Stories like this are happening all around the country and all around the world, as far away as in Johannesburg, South Africa, where young women are pushing coding in schools, or in Popayan, a rural town in Colombia, where teachers are together rolling out a program to teach computer science. And this work is powered by teachers such as Flo Vaughn. This is a teacher in Oakland who herself didn't know computer science, but she learned it. Not only is she teaching it in class, she's helping the other teachers learn. The work of these educators is collectively changing the face of who is studying computer science, a field that has historically been dominated by white and Asian men, but is now reflecting the diversity of everybody who are the students in this country and even on this planet. I want to close by thanking the over 1.5 million teachers who have helped introduce computer science in classrooms. This movement that I'm talking about is powered by teachers. These teachers are doing one of the most important jobs in our world. They're changing the face of computer science, and they're also changing the face of opportunity for our future generations. My hat's off to the teachers, and thank you to all of you. Please help spread this movement to teach computer science to every student in every school.
All right, welcome back, everybody, and thanks again for tuning in today to FedTalks. I'm FedScoop Editor-in-Chief Billy Mitchell, and next up joining me for a fireside chat is Dave Levy, Vice President of U.S. Federal Government for Nonprofit and Healthcare at Amazon Web Services. Dave, thanks so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Well, thanks for having me. I'm doing great. Really excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you about AI-driven solutions. Obviously, Amazon has a lot of knowledge in this space, a pretty storied past when it comes to AI and cloud. So I think it's going to be an apt discussion for this week at AI Week. But let's start right there with the journey to AI. Obviously, like I said, Amazon has a bit of a past in this, using AI in the marketplace, and obviously with Amazon Web Services supporting the cloud for the Amazon marketplace. So I'd love to discuss the lessons that you might be able to pass on to some of your government customers and those listening in the audience today for those looking to move into this direction.
Sure. While AWS, we enable AI solutions across tens of thousands of customers today. We have a long history with AI, which powers our Amazon.com business. And at AWS, we're focused, especially in my area, we're focused on putting the potential of AI and machine learning directly in the hands of public sector organizations. But at Amazon, we've been building machine learning capabilities for more than 20 years. And that all started when we rolled out our first recommendation engine. And we used that experience and this knowledge to develop machine learning and AI services that can be used by customers with any level of expertise. And so without machine learning, Amazon.com couldn't grow into new markets or customer segments, or improve its customer experience and selection, and optimize its logistics for speed and quality. So there are just unlimited best practices and lessons and use cases agencies can learn, even from our own journey at Amazon, when building, for example, personalized citizens experiences, or accelerating and leveraging research, discovering new opportunities to innovate, and even automating back office functions can become less manual.
That's great to hear. And I know that during current times, things have gotten difficult, especially for the federal government. During COVID-19, there's been a big response. So I'd love to hear how Amazon has kind of changed the way it's thought about serving that government customer base, and how you've been able to provide services during this critical time.
Sure. I mean, if anything, the pandemic has further emphasized the need to be digital and agile, which are operational pillars we encourage of all of our customers to embrace for innovation and efficiency. But now also for disaster response and preparedness, we're seeing a lot of our agency customers accelerate longstanding digital transformation and AI adoption plans, and that have been in development for quite some time. Now, out of short-term necessity, they're doing it to deliver relief services and for long-term needs to predict and prepare for future crises with forecasting tools.
Very, very, very interesting. I know one of the major customers you have currently within the federal space is the military. I know that Amazon has been pushing in that direction for quite a while. So what areas do you see as most important? We're talking about AI today specifically, but I'm sure that it runs the gamut when you think about technology. But what areas do you see as the most important within the DoD when it comes to applying AI technologies, and how is Amazon supporting the mission and the warfighter?
You're right. AWS continues to proudly work with numerous organizations across DoD, and the mission is pretty clear. How do we help those responsible for protecting the safety and security of our world? And instead of focusing on specific areas, what we encourage decision makers to take a holistic approach to AI, so that all members of the DoD are empowered to make better decisions and just move faster in the support of their mission. This is our CEO. This is why our CEO, Andy Jassy, participates in the National Security Council on Artificial Intelligence, and encourages and supports government executives to consider AI at every level of decision making, from making it easier to procure AI software to leveraging machine learning to inform strategic global strategies.
So what other mission sets across the government do you see being most impacted by AI? Obviously, we talked about the military, but I'm sure there's others like space. I know Amazon's big in space. And then, it's not always about the mission. There's things that are non-mission related. There's back-end services that also need that sort of support. So maybe let's start with the other large missions that maybe can be impacted by AI, and then some of those other things that aren't as mission related.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Billy. I mean, AI is often associated to large disruptive change and innovation, and it clearly can enable that, and it does enable that. We're helping agencies collect data at the edge and use AI to accelerate time to actionable insights, and warfighters to stay ahead of adversaries and increase things like shooter accuracy, particularly for targets beyond the line of sight. But what's often overlooked is AI's potential in maximizing operational efficiencies. As an example, many customers are using AWS AI services to build conversational agents to increase contact center efficiency, something that's been particularly important given the COVID-19 pandemic. And even something as mundane as document analysis can be greatly improved by AI technologies, which is helping a lot of organizations get information faster.
So when we have a conversation about AI, something I so often hear is that data is the key. It's the foundation and so important to all of this. So I'd like to go back to data and data management and ask you, what your thought is on the role that those things play in this AI equation.
Yeah, big keys. I mean, it used to be that those first to information were the ones with the competitive edge. Now it's not just about who has the information first, but who can make decisions the fastest, and AI has great potential here. But it's important for organizations to always keep in mind the importance of data hygiene. Your AI and ML applications are only as good as the data that's being fed into them. So data management is of utmost importance, and it should be part of any IT strategy considering organizational-wide AI adoption.
And Dave, as we close out here today, another part of this equation is the skills and the workforce needed to support AI. I know that Amazon is thinking a lot about this, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on why skills and training and the workforce is critical to supporting the development of AI.
Sure. Our goal at AWS is to put machine learning and artificial intelligence in the hands of every developer, and workforce development in this area is critical. Many of our government customers work closely with us to stay to close to the latest emerging technologies, and we prioritize empowering them, not limiting them, but empowering them. In the spirit of this, we offer numerous learning tracks across job families like cloud architecture and software developer, many of which are dedicated to AI and ML.
Great. Dave, well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been tremendous catching up as always. And I look forward to speaking with you in the future about everything Amazon's doing with AI, cloud, and all of that.
Great. Thanks for having me today, Billy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Billy Mitchell, Editor-in-Chief of FedScoop, and now joining me is Jane Data, NASA Chief Human Capital Officer, for a chat on our new normal, engaging the remote workforce. Jane, thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here.
So, Jane, let's start. It's the end of November 2020, more than 9 months into this pandemic at this point. How has NASA adjusted to this new world of mostly virtual work? And if you can, in what ways was NASA at all prepared for this shift in work?
Great question. So let me start with the first part, which is, have we adjusted? And I would say, yes, we've adjusted very well to this. However, it did take us a little bit of time to get there. So at the outset, before we knew that this was going to turn into a pandemic, we had a lot of good experience with teleworking. People had telework agreements, people intermittently teleworked across the agency. It's something that we had adopted as a workforce strategy some years back. We also had a lot of experience with virtual tools. We had adopted those at least 9 or 10 years ago. So we had quite a bit of experience, especially connecting people from one site to another. So this was virtual connection when you were in your office with people in offices in other locations. So it was easy to take that experience and use it when you were just connecting everybody up from their home locations. However, the difference was that we were going to scale really rapidly. So if you think about people teleworking or using virtual tools for some small percentage of their time to a rapid change where everybody sort of went home in a week's period of time, so that 90% of our workforce was working from their home or some other non-office location. That's an enormous leap. Moreover, I'd say, people who are used to like teleworking and maybe connecting through virtual tools for a few meetings in a single day in a week, were doing it full time with all the distractions of their home environments that made it hard to do all the balancing. So for that reason, that just the sudden jump in the number of people and the amount of time, I think it did take us a couple of months to kind of settle in, but I would say that we have made enormous strides in being efficient and productive over the last 5 or 6 months. So.
And it sounds like you were decently prepared though, because you had made those strides before that, moving to tools,
yes.
and some people had teleworking agreements in place. So, it sounds like you were prepared. And then I would love to follow up by hearing, where things stand. Obviously, this thing isn't a linear curve. Things are up and down. What's the workforce, the proportion of the workforce that's working remotely at this point?
So essentially, anyone who can perform all of their work without being on site is asked to remain in the telework status. So we're probably at about 75%, is still teleworking, maybe a little bit less, but it's still a good deal more than 50%. So I sit in what we call a mission support function, which is HR and other folks in finance and procurement. And, there's almost nothing that we can't do remotely. And so we do. Where we have people working on site is when they have manufacturing or integration or test or things that require them to be in a specific facility. So we've been really careful not to bring people back on site too rapidly and be driven by the kind of mission critical nature of being on site. So that has left most of us still working remotely for all the time that we work. So it's and I don't know how long that will last. None of us do. The winter is going to bring us an answer, and then we're going to get into the spring of next year, and that might give us a different one. So not got a crystal ball, but we're in it for some longer period of time for sure.
Sure. I could imagine. And I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I will ask you to sort of play that role for at least a brief second. And, the question everybody has on their mind at this point is, now that this has occurred, and it seems to, for large proportions of the federal government, it's worked. People can work remotely. This is proven. It kind of brings the question, what's the future of federal work look like in the long run in a post-COVID world? We don't know when COVID's going to end, but we know that telework is an option when it does. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, at least from a NASA perspective, is there a future for a more telework-enabled federal workforce at your agency?
I would say the short answer is yes. And I think that the open question is the degree to which we move to a more remote or telework environment. So I think we've actually learned a lot in a very condensed period of time about the advantages and in some cases the disadvantages of telework. And so I think what we've proven, though, on balance, is that there are many advantages that we get with a where geography is not as important. And I think we're starting to find ways to adapt to the deficiencies of telework, i.e. you're not actually seeing people face to face, building a sense of community, developing relationships, all the things that, you know, an on-site workforce can do more readily than a virtual workforce. We're starting to find ways to make that, or to shore up those kinds of advantages of on-site when you're not on-site. So the question is, how far do we get with making off-site work feel as much of a positive from an engagement and community and relationship building as being on-site? So, so I think that the question lingers about, yes, we're going to actually enable more telework than before. We have supervisors maybe who were very skeptical about telework and weren't all that for it, and maybe they've suddenly realized that, hey, this isn't so bad. You know, there's a lot of work that can get done, and I didn't think so before. At the same time, I think there is this essential need that people have to see each other and interact with each other. And so I don't know whether in the near future we're going to move very much more to mostly offsite, or if it's still going to be mostly onsite with a more liberal telework posture. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that social interaction and the importance of that, because that's the root of engagement for a lot of federal employees, being in office and actually seeing their mission and work. So I'd love to ask, you know, we're focused on the IT and technology side of this situation, how IT and new technologies can actually play a role in making that engagement stronger in this remote standpoint, because I'm sure that as you've mentioned, it's something that's been part of the challenge is making sure that people who thrive in an office environment can still do so when they're sitting at home alone. So I'd love, you know, your take as an HR expert on, you know, how technology can be a bolster to making sure that the federal workforce has everything in place to effectively keep employees engaged and meet mission demands.
Yes, the IT infrastructure is pivotal for allowing the interconnection among the workforce and people and their supervisors as well. And I think that there are really two components to this, the IT infrastructure, in terms of how it helps create engagement. One is actually just the tools and the functions themselves. So I would say that over the course of the last 9 months, our agency has seen a real improvement and increase in the amount of functionality that we have with the tools that are in place for us. So things have gotten easier, and we have more things that we can do with the platforms that we've adopted. We are also looking at other sort of increasing the portfolio of tools in the platform so that we can do things like large agency meetings where you've got thousands of people, or which would say take the place of an in-person town hall with lots of people, as an example. Because platforms are sometimes not good at the big ones, and other ones are. And so you sort of need a suite of these things so that you can address different needs. And we're not all the way there yet, but we're getting on towards a better future for all of the kinds of things that we use virtual tools for. The other piece, though, and I think this piece is just as important, is actually learning to use the tools to do things that you would otherwise do in person, like the virtual water coolers and the virtual whiteboards and just the habits, simple habits. So, you know, I often hear people, you know, say that they miss the being able to just walk down the hall and pop into somebody's office and have a conversation about something. And while it's true that whilst we're all in our individual locations, we can't literally walk down the hall and see each other, but, you know, just picking up the the phone, the virtual phone, and calling them. These are all habits that we just have to start figuring out how to use in a way that feels satisfying, in addition to leveraging other features that maybe we haven't done before. So I don't know yet whether the virtual tools will 100% be sufficient, meaning be just as effective as everything that we could do. But I think that they've come a long way, even in the months that we've been out. And I feel like there's probably further that they will go. So we'll have more tools and they'll be better. They'll replicate the in-person experience better over the course of time. And that will really help allow people to feel like they really are connecting and communicating with each other. So.
Great, thanks for that. I think we have time for one final question, and I think it's an important one. And it's how have workforce management and leadership, those important skills that managers have to have, changed in this new environment as their workforce is no longer in person in front of them?
It's a great question. And actually, like IT, I will say that the way that we the tools that we give to our supervisors and managers can make the difference between success and not success in a virtual environment like this. So we have invested a lot in providing some support mechanisms for our supervisors and managers in this time. Now, some of that is oriented towards how you help people like figure out how to cope with kids where their schools are closed, and concern about people in their friends and family groups getting COVID. So it's more of the crisis management in this particular era. But I think it has also taught our supervisors to do more of what they were already doing, but which was more of a kind of thing that they kind of did organically, and they maybe didn't think about it, to be actually very deliberate about connecting with their people and asking their people how they are doing, and providing forums, be it little group meetings or one-on-ones, to really do the check-ins. And so this is all stuff that they have done in the past, but they may not even have realized they were doing, because it was sort of happening real time and they weren't thinking about it. Now we're asking our supervisors and managers to really plan how they are going to connect with every individual on their team, plan how they're going to reach out to their peers, plan how they're going to ask questions of their leadership when they need some help. It's all of those things which are not new skills. They're just skills that have come to the fore as being really critical for supporting the workforce in this time. The last thing I'll say is that I think that the leadership of any organization, including ours, I mean, we have just the most amazing leaders, and they have come together to really have a unified voice on how we're going to manage in this crisis and what our priorities are, i.e. our priorities are workforce health and safety and engagement. And so they've been willing to really spend a lot of their time and energy and speaking in one voice. So obviously that's a lot about crisis management and not necessarily about, say, the future of work on, if people are teleworking more. But I will say that generally, even post-COVID, the idea that senior leadership are endorsing that this is a way that we're going to live and work in an organization matters a lot to helping people kind of get past some of those initial barriers and really feel comfortable with and take advantage of a lot of the goodness that comes with not being tied to an office structure and a commute and all the things that go along with that. So.
Absolutely. Well, you've brought a lot of insight today to this audience, so I tremendously appreciate that. And I definitely am keeping an eye on what the future of work in the federal government looks like, and I'll definitely keep an eye on what you're doing at NASA. But for now, I appreciate everything you've brought today. Jane Data, thank you so much.
Great pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
I'm Jake Williams, State Scoop's Associate Publisher, and we're here with Mitch Landrieu, the former Lieutenant Governor for the state of Louisiana and the former Mayor of the City of New Orleans. Mitch Landrieu is now the President and founder of E Pluribus Unum, a nonprofit organization designed to build a more just, equitable, and inclusive South. E Pluribus Unum is focused on changing the divisive narratives that perpetuate systemic and interpersonal racism, cultivating and empowering courageous leaders who are advancing racial equity and championing transformative policy change. Mayor Landrieu, thanks for joining us here at FedTalks.
It's great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
So, Mayor Landrieu, let's talk first about some of the work that you did in elected office around technology, data, and innovation within criminal justice. And then we'll segue to talk a little bit about E Pluribus Unum. So in 2016, you signed an executive order in New Orleans to develop an open data policy for the city. Open data is one of those things that folks have been talking about and working on for so long. The approach has certainly changed as we've seen things like artificial intelligence crop up. But from your perspective, how has your perspective on open data changed, and how can open data truly become accessible for the everyday citizen?
Well, first of all, the general thrust of what we tried to do was to live up to an idea that it's hard to manage something well if you can't count it, if you can't see it, if you don't know about it. Otherwise, people are just having arguments about what it is that they think is true without really relying on the facts. And so the idea of governing with data is to know what you can know and to see what you can see. And of course, in a lot of municipal governments across the United States of America, we weren't really well equipped to do that. We were really behind in technology, the structure of the technology, the way that it was used, and our ability to see. And so when you're trying to do things like reform the police department or eradicate blighted housing or increase housing where you need it to be, or dealing with bad healthcare outcomes, it's helpful to know that, number one. Number two, it was really important to us to have input from the community. And so that's why we wanted to make it open to everybody. So when we would have what we would call blight stat meetings or crime stat meetings, which are now ubiquitous, what we would do is we would have those meetings in public and the portals would be open to the public so that when the folks that worked for me reported out on what it is that they thought they knew, they would actually have people from the communities where they were gathering information there with access to the same data so that we could make sure that we were looking and seeing the same thing. There were oftentimes, for example, just on the issue of filling potholes, when the head of public works would say there was a certain status in a certain community, and the community leader who had read the portal was there to say, I heard that you wrote that, but actually you got it wrong, that wasn't true. And so what it does is it opens up a complete dialogue and a complete communion between the community and the governing entity. It allows you to see what you can see. And in that regard, it helps you to manage towards whatever goal, that executive and that city council is trying to achieve on behalf of the people.
So, you talk about data and, you put quite a focus on using data, both open and internal government data, to drive decision-making in city government. One of those efforts was NOLA for Life, which you kicked off to reduce the city's murder rate through the use of advanced analytics. Now, the program certainly had its critics, but looking back now, what did you learn? What should other communities take away from those lessons?
Well, remember, data can sound very sterile and it can sound very antiseptic, but it is really connected to solving real world problems. And in the city of New Orleans, as we continue to have throughout the United States of America, we had a huge problem with gun violence. But we didn't really have any data on who was shooting, who was being shot, what neighborhoods it was necessarily happening in, what efficacy police response times were having, how could you use mental health, substance abuse, and other measures rather than just more police to solve problems. And so we thought it was really important, especially around the issue of death, for the people to really understand what was happening. And so we created what was called a comprehensive approach from soup to nuts. It had police action, but it also had community action. It had police interventions, but it also had mental health and substance abuse in it. And we thought that we could show through data that if you applied a all-on approach from bottom to top, from soft to hard, from left to right, and it was comprehensive and it was focused and targeted, then actually you could reduce the number of murders and the number of deaths in the city of New Orleans. Yes, it's true that our group had its critics because people weren't reading the data. But if you look at that plan, it is really one of the most comprehensive violence reduction strategies that's ever been implemented in a major American city. And it has had significant results and saved a lot of lives.
So switching gears a little bit to talk about policing, we're on the cusp of a presidential transition. You participated in the police data initiative during the Obama administration. Now that work has not quite had the momentum it did at the federal level since, but some of the lessons learned have continued in police departments across the country. Now, a little bit removed from the mayor's office, how would you advise elected officials to approach data-driven policing and just overall police department strategy now?
Well, those are two separate questions. First of all, the reason the momentum stopped is because the Trump administration stopped them. And that was a big mistake. So hopefully the Biden-Harris administration will start them again. I don't think there's any question, given what we've seen in the last year, starting with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, that our police departments can do a much better job, no question about it, of being better hired, better trained, better supervised. All of them ought to have body cameras on them. There ought to be peer policing protocols put in place like we did in the city of New Orleans, which means that police officers that are on call together should be stopping other police officers from doing bad things rather than acquiescing to them, and then a whole host of other things. So there's no question that policing in the United States of America, and I think this is probably true writ large, has to do a better job of actually protecting and serving rather than harming. And I think there's a lot of emotional discussion between and amongst all of the things that I just said, but I believe that the data reflects that that is true. The other part of it is actually using data to figure out where you're supposed to go. I mean, if you're just dealing with crime, all of the statistics demonstrate that there's only 1 or 2% of the population that is involved in violent activity. That should argue in favor of, if you're spending money, where you should spend the money and how you should spend it. It also indicates that we're spending way too much money on militarization of police departments rather than working on mental health, substance abuse, and all other things that would stop people from actually entering into the criminal justice system, whether it's through the police or some other way. And so you can use data, again, it's fairly benign, just to be able to see what you can see and know what you can know, and then get into an argument about how to interpret it. But it's essential to be able to know which direction you're going in and where you should allocate your resources and where you're having some effect or impact. Both of those things have to happen in order to make sure that all people are safe and secure as they deserve to be.
And so, you talked a little bit about sort of this moment that we're in right now. I mean, E Pluribus Unum is about breaking down the barriers of race and class, specifically in the South. And we continue to be at this time where having terrible acts of violence committed against people of color, in response, we're having and continuing these conversations of people of privilege on how to be actively anti-racist and how to build a more inclusive society. Tell me about how you see the role of technology and data in breaking down those barriers and sort of promoting that inclusion.
Well, technology and data is important, but really just knowledge about our history is important too, which is hopefully with technology and data will help us do. There's no question that in the United States of America, slavery was our original sin, and racism and the perpetuation of it institutionally continues to be our nation's Achilles heel. I don't think it's only in the United States of America. We have this sense of white supremacy and nationalism across the world, but clearly in the United States of America, and especially in the South, we continue to struggle with that legacy. And if we're going to get out of it, white people in particular have to really understand our full and total history, because it hasn't been told. History's only been told through a very narrow prism, and it's led us to close our eyes to difficult things. The explosion of news around the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and I mean, actually, you can go all the way back to Emmett Till, and before that indicates to us that we have a very, very long way to go. And the first thing we need to do is to learn. There's lots of scholarship on this issue right now. There's a plethora of it. There's some fantastic new writers, and there are lots of different researchers that are working on putting the kind of data together that we need. And of course, using technology to make sure it gets where it goes. At the end of the day, though, people's kind of eyes glaze over a little bit when you talk about data and technology. It's all designed to tell us the truth. And if we're open to hearing the truth and seeing the truth, whether it's coming from a history book or a collection of data, it's going to help us formulate policies as human beings that actually bring us together. And finally, there has to be a political decision made, and political meaning an accumulation of opinion by most people in America that this is an issue that we have to confront. Because unless and until we do it, unless we go through it so that we can get to the other side, it's going to be very hard for us to honor what the name of our organization is, E Pluribus Unum, our nation's motto, out of many we are one. The United States of America hasn't scratched the surface on her capability to do great things yet, but I can tell you this, it should be clear to us by now that unless we figure out a way to do it together, to make sure that everybody has opportunity and everybody has responsibility, everybody is treated justly and fairly, it's going to be very difficult for us to hit the next mark that's so important to us. And that's what E Pluribus Unum's mission is. We understand that it's going to take a long time. It occurred to me the other day that Donald Trump failed in building a wall along the Mexico border, but he evidently succeeded in building a wall right down the middle of America. And it's a wall that we're going to have to break down again and continue to work on if we want to become that unified nation that we all aspire to be.
So, I mean, Mayor Landrieu, I mean, while you're now leading E Pluribus Unum, you're not too far removed from political life. When you say something like that and talk about the divide that exists in our country, how are you through E Pluribus Unum, working right now to address it?
Well, that's a great question. What we have done is put our feet on the ground and in the soil, and we have traveled across 30 different counties in 13 states. We've talked to over 1,000 people and had long form interviews, just trying to ask people what they think, what they feel, what they see. How do they know what they think they know? There's a difference between what people know and what they think they know. And of course, data helps you kind of close the gap between the two things. And in some instances, the way people feel and the way people really are not necessarily the same thing. And there's lots of evidence that people ignore data because emotionally they feel the need to do so. So we actually have conducted these interviews. We've set up an organizational structure where we're doing basically three things. We're working hard on teaching people the history and changing the narrative that has come to us in inappropriate ways through history books. We're actually creating a leadership academy and inviting leaders from across the South to come in and learn about equity and justice. And then we're building a policy platform so that we can answer the question that people will necessarily ask us. Well, if you think there's institutional bias and racism, A, can you prove it to me? And B, if it is, what specifically can we do through policies to change it on the federal, state, and local area? And we think that in working in those three areas, narrative change, leadership development, and policy, we will begin to turn the tide and get America to focus on how really fantastic we can be when we come together as one. That's the important thing, to seek, to know, and to find common ground. And you can only do that when you believe that we come to the table of democracy as equals. Now, that's a short sentence, but that is a long haul. It is a steep mountain. But, as I believe that the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice, I do believe that. I don't think it's an easy bend, and I don't think it bends on its own. And I think the work will continue for as long as the United States of America exists. So we're doing that work, and we're pleased to do it. We're thankful that we've had the opportunity to do it and privileged, and we're looking forward to people being open to hearing what we think is a great vision for the country.
You talk about data, and you talk about sort of making people understand and believe data and understand the conclusions that it's pulling from. We live in a society that's so dominated by conversations about what is true and what is false, what information is accurate and not accurate. How are you trying to make the case to the folks that you're talking to in these interviews, but also writ large, about the reliability of the data that you're talking about?
Well, that's a really good question. In the recent presidential race, which we're still moving through as we speak, there's a big uproar about how close or how off the polls were. Polling is an imprecise science. There's no question about that. But, the number of COVID deaths is not necessarily imprecise. And yet people still think that there's a conspiracy theory about making up those numbers. So it's really hard to get into people's heads that don't want to believe what they should know to be true. On the other hand, we kind of know, we don't know exactly yet how many people voted for which candidate. And yet the interpretation of that data is vastly different. For example, on election night and a couple of days thereafter, the narrative was that, oh my God, this was the closest election in American history. And half the country is one way versus half the country is not. Well, in fact, that turns out not to be true. As the votes get counted and the electoral vote goes up, it appears as though Vice President Biden's lead in the Electoral College is expanding. He's at about 306 right now. And he is going to win the race by somewhere upwards of 5 million votes. If you look at our history from 1960 until today, there have been 7 other presidential races that were far closer than that. And so really the narrative is it's not really that close a race at all. And of course, the reason why that changed is simply just because of the timing of and how we counted the votes and whose votes we counted first. And so you can see how the narrative can be in conflict with the data, and then it's really hard to change them back to get people on the same page. That really is a matter of leadership and how you use the data and how you use the technology. And so that's always going to be a constant struggle when people are fighting over who is going to grab and hang on to power and how they're going to use it, hopefully in an appropriate way.
Mayor Landry, we could talk so much more about all of these things. We covered a lot in a pretty short amount of time. Thanks for joining us here at FedTalks.
It was great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you to our audience for being a part of this conversation. Stay tuned for great sessions here at FedTalks.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Fed Talks. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Editor-in-Chief Billy Mitchell of FedScoop, and it's my delight to chat today with Congressman Will Hurd of Texas. Congressman Hurd, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's always fun to be with you guys. Y'all have been covering my stuff since the very beginning, so I'm a huge fan of FedScoop and all that y'all do.
Well, we're a big fan of yours as well, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you over the years. Congressman, we have a lot to cover today, including a new AI strategy that you released recently with Robin Kelly. But first, I want to get a little bit into the tech basics, if you will, at the federal level, sort of back to the start of your time in Congress, back when you were serving on Oversight and Government Reform and headed up the IT subcommittee. You did a lot of work, as we all know, on the MGT Act, FTARA, things like that. And it seems like, you know, in our coverage, we've noticed a lot of progress being made in those annual or biannual FTARA scorecards. But I'd love to get your perspective, you know, what's the needle moving, when the needle moving forward, what's that look like? And how has IT acquisition reform kind of moved forward in your time that you've been in Congress?
Well, I have to begin by saying when I was in the Hindu Kush Mountains in a tent contemplating leaving the CIA to run for Congress, I never thought IT procurement would be one of my things, right? And when I won in 2014 and Jason Chaffetz called me and said, hey, I want you to be a chairman of a subcommittee, I didn't have the heart to tell him at the time, no. Oversight and government reform, I never thought about that. I was like, you know, that's where kind of all the fights and weirdos were. And then my team was like, yeah, the answer is yes. It's you know, it's rare for a freshman to get a gavel, and to be able to work on issues that I cared about was interesting. So it was kind of, you know, I had a computer science degree and I helped start a cybersecurity company. And so it was like, that's where we started from. And one of the first hearings, if not the first hearing we had, was on the Data Act. And I'm preparing for it. And I'm like, what the hell is the Data Act? And it was like, okay, we got to have information in the federal government for financial transactions in machine readable format. And I'm like, it's 2015. We don't already have it, right? Like it was crazy. And then from that, it went to the Open Data Act to make sure all information is available in machine readable format so that we can, you know, take advantage of that and use machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms to use that. And so getting into those weeds, you started realizing very quickly that we were a little bit behind the ball, and that if you paid attention to this and were consistent, you can see changes. And that's why I'm proud of the FTARA scorecard. You know, FTARA the FTARA scorecard was originally designed to keep track of 4 of the 7 elements that FTARA passed. But Robin and I, over our time, turned it into a scorecard for digital hygiene. And what we saw was at the very beginning, I think we only had 2 people that got a C. That was the highest score. And it's taken 5 years to get for all 24 CFO agencies to have a passing grade. And the reason this improved is because of the consistent oversight and being able to boil down things into simple metrics. And I think that is what we need in order to see change happen within the federal space. So I'm proud of those things and little things like the Megabyte Act. This said that federal agencies need to know all the software licensing that they have. They weren't doing this, right? It was insane when we first put this as a category on the FITARA scorecard. I think only one had an A, the rest of them were failing. Guess what? That category is getting ready to be taken off the scorecard because everybody's now has a passing grade. And if you don't even know what software you have on your system, right? That increases vulnerabilities for attacks. You can save money, and so ultimately, all of this is about how do we create a culture of modernization in order to make sure that we're providing better digital facing services to the American people and using our money wisely. And so I've enjoyed getting into the weeds on this. Oh, and then we learned about, hey, CIOs do not have the authority and the power to do the things they need to do in order to defend their infrastructure, right? And so you can't drag a CIO in front of Congress and be like, why didn't you do this, when they don't have the authority to do what they need to do in order to defend the system. That was the reason for the Modernizing Government Technology Act. Now, we found the fight between CIOs and CFOs, right? CFOs don't want to give up any of their authority. And so that's why when I was on the committee, we would always bring the CFO, the CIO, and at minimum, the deputy agency head, because usually, you say, oh, I can't do this. And I want to be able to talk to the other person who's getting in the way and being like, why the hell aren't you allowing that to happen? And so that's one of the frictions. MGT is getting implemented. It's not moving as quickly as I would have liked because some of it is the bureaucratic inertia by some of the CFOs getting in the way.
Let's tie this now to your AI strategy. Obviously, those technologies are very the technologies we deal with in the federal agencies are kind of the foundation for a lot of the work you look to set forth in this AI strategy. But I'd like to start from the strategy level. We've seen a lot of talk from the White House. There's other commissions like the National Security Commission on AI who are kind of tasked to do similar things in building out AI strategies, but to sort of maintain the edge on China and other international leaders. But I'd love to kind of dive into what's different about yours and what kind of needs to be done so that it can be successful and actually launch before you leave Congress.
Sure. So first off, the good thing, a lot of people are doing a lot of things on AI. That's a great move. In this national strategy, we started with step one, right? Recognize the work that has already been done. The Obama administration had done a lot of work on AI, and the Trump administration has done some great work on AI. Lynn Parker and Michael Kratsios are national treasures, and what they've been doing within the Office of Science and Technology in the White House has been fantastic. So that's the lead into our strategy. Then what we do is assert Congress' role in a lot of these areas, right? Whether it's funding, whether it's establishing oversight, Congress has a role in this broader ecosystem, and we need to do that. And then we identified the need for a strategy that's based on 4 pillars, and that's workforce development, research, national security, and ethics. And so this document that we created and we're trying to pass, and we got a great group of bipartisan legislators that are on board with this. Hopefully, we're going to get this through the Science and Technology Committee and then to the floor for a vote and then the lame duck. The fact that Eddie Bernice Johnson's on board, that's going to help. And so we're excited about that. But we worked with the Bipartisan Policy Center on developing this, and we had 4 white papers on each one of those 4 pillars. And each white paper, I think we're up to 81 recommendations on what, and those 81 recommendations can be individual bills that I hope get introduced in the next Congress and can be a foundation for all of the committees to look at this. And ultimately, I think there's a handful of things that make what we're doing a little bit unique. We're addressing and talking about the federal funding in research, right? Congress has the role in doing that. How do we increase the federal piece of basic research? We all know the stats on how the government of China by the end of this year has outpaced the United States when it comes to percentage of GDP based on research. Now, I would say if you translate that dollar amount into man and woman hours, they probably surpassed us a whole many years ago, right? And so we have to fix that, and federal funding for some of these basic areas is important. then I think Congress, and I hope in a new Congress, when all the committees are developing their oversight plans, the beginning of every new Congress, the committees have an oversight plan on the things that they're going to look at. Part of that oversight plan needs to include talking about and reviewing the regulatory agencies' roles in monitoring development of artificial intelligence. Something as simple as we already have laws on the books. So if a teller at a bank can't discriminate against somebody for the color of their skin to get a loan, the algorithm can't do it either, right? And then how are the regulatory agencies enforcing that? How are the agencies that are involved, that are covered by that oversight committee, how are they adopting artificial intelligence into their data operations, right? And so Congress can play a role in shining a light on how to do that. And I hope that somebody comes up with a scorecard on the adaptation of AI into the federal government. That's something that if I had a little bit more time, we would have spent time working on, because we have seen how when you follow and pay attention and continue to ask questions and compare and contrast behavior from multiple times a year, you see real change.
That's great, and I'm sure that will be adopted at some point. Looking more on the military side, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the particular importance of AI when it comes to national security and defense. Obviously, the DoD is one of the agencies that's pushing most in this direction. And when we talk about defense and national security, that's when it seems most important to actually develop AI for to defend against our adversaries, China, Russia, et cetera. So I'd love to hear about, what your strategy, how your strategy might play a role on the military side, and what those challenges are that the military is facing in particular when it comes to adopting AI.
Sure. And I think one of the most important things, I came to this. So Robin and I held the first hearings on AI in Congress. And it started because I'm a co-chair of an Aspen cybersecurity initiative, and a lot of the conversations that we were having, this is a mix of industry and government, former government folks, was around the adoption of principles in AI. And I talked with Robin. I was like, let's do a series of hearings. And when I started talking to folks, if they were older than me, and you said AI, they thought about HAL 9000, creepy voice robot from Space Odyssey, right, 2001. And they were younger than me, they thought Roomba, right, the vacuum that goes around and cleans things up. But then when you start having conversation in Washington, D.C. about AI, it always naturally turns to, should a robot be able to kill a robot? And should a robot be able to kill a human, right? And so I think that's where most people's concerns around the AI use in national security. Also, the future of cybersecurity is going to be bad AI versus good AI. So can we defend our digital infrastructures? Because we're going to need artificial intelligence in order to do that. But I would say is that this narrow focus of artificial intelligence on national security is sometimes not beneficial to the development of the whole industry. And why do I say that? Because developing a workforce pipeline is not just a national security issue, right? But it's something that is if we're gonna make sure that we have the kind of AI practitioners we need in order to defend our digital systems and our country, you're gonna need that workforce pipeline, right? When it comes to the development of ethics around artificial intelligence, right? This is not uniquely a national security issue, but it impacts national security as well. And so the interconnectedness of all these issues are important. Now, why is it uniquely why does national security matter, and why do we always talk about national security when it comes to artificial intelligence? Because we're in a race, period, end of story, right? The Chinese government has stolen information and they're building things now. Back when I was in the CIA, the idea of made in China was still meant it was something was a knockoff or inferior product. That's not the case anymore. When you think last year, 5 of the top 10 venture capital deals were Chinese companies. Only 3 were American. And if you would have seen those numbers 10 years prior, 8 American companies were the top venture capital deals. And I don't even think there was a Chinese company on the list, right? And so this is truly a competition. And we know that the government of China doesn't care about civil liberties. We know that they don't care about privacy. And so are we going to drive the development of these new tools that are going to decide not just the American economy, but the economy for the entire world for the rest of the century? And that's the struggle. And so it's not purely being able to defend ourselves. It's also making sure the U.S. economy stays the most important economy in the world, right? Because that impacts our way of life. And that is ultimately, I think, the national security challenge, is making sure we stay the global leader in advanced technology. And this is what the national strategy that Robin and I developed was all about. How do we continue that? And the U.S. has been a leader in advanced technology since the end of World War II. That is what has led to our success. And we got to make sure we stay focused.
Congressman Hurd, we're quickly running out of time, but I have a quick final question for you. It's sort of a toss-up depending on who you ask, who's really leading this race. Is it China? Is it the U.S.? Some people will say it's China. Some people say it's the U.S. What's your take as we close this out?
We need to operate as if we're behind, but here's what I can say. The U.S. can win. We can win this battle. An authoritarian government can get somewhere first, right? We saw that with the Russians and Sputnik 1, and some people don't talk enough about Sputnik 2, which was a week later after Sputnik 1. And so, but the United States can win this battle, right? That's the most important thing, because I will make sure, I believe that a free markets, right? Liberal democracy, these are all things, entrepreneurship, these are all things that will ultimately help us continue to evolve and get better. But that means we got to get our act together. We got to double down on research. We got to make sure we're attracting the best and the brightest from all around the world, and that we're preparing our kids for jobs that don't exist today. We do those things, we're going to continue. We're going to be able to win this battle, and that's what I'm hoping to continue to do even when I'm out of Congress.
All righty, thank you so much, Congressman Will Hurd. Thanks.
Always a pleasure, Billy.
Welcome. It is our pleasure to be a part of FedScoop's first AI Week, a most important topic surrounding the greatest technology transformation of our time, artificial intelligence. My name is Anthony Robbins, and I'm the Vice President of Public Sector for NVIDIA, and I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Ian Buck. Dr. Ian Buck got his PhD from Stanford University. He joined NVIDIA back in 2004, therefore has been with us for more than 15 years. He's the General Manager and the Vice President of our Accelerated Computing Division, and known inside of NVIDIA and outside as the father of CUDA. And we'll talk a lot about that. Ian, welcome.
Thanks, Anthony. Pleasure to be here.
Okay. So this is a big topic, and we're delighted to have Ian with us. Ian has keynoted several GTC DCs at the Ronald Reagan Center. In addition, he has testified before Congress on topics relating to artificial intelligence and much more. So let's go ahead and get started. Ian, I've heard you speak to customers around the federal government often over the last couple of years, and you often talk about AI and the frozen winter and what happened back in 2012. So for context to our audience, tell us about that.
Yeah, for many years, AI was seen as sort of this mythical technology. It was reserved only for Hollywood stories of and the movies. What was happening in the research space was quite underwhelming. AI was deemed the sort of mythical science that was going to go nowhere. And despite a huge push many decades ago, the research and the promise of AI, perhaps the expectations were a bit high, it petered out. And much of the brain trust of academia and industry focused elsewhere to get their to solve their problems, to do their computing. It actually took us an undergraduate a student up in Canada working on a problem of computer vision. There was a competition called ImageNet. It was a challenge. It was a challenge that was invented actually by a professor at Stanford to create a method for identifying what was inside of a picture. So this challenge would show you pictures of things, and you had to say it was a dog, a cat, a cart, a stop sign, etc. And you were judged on the quality and performance of your system to recognize images. These algorithms that they were using in these competitions were not AI based. They were manually programmed. People were taught, programmers would train a computer how to recognize certain shapes like octagons for a stop sign, or look for wheels, or look for facial patterns manually. They were literally programming those things in. And, world-class solutions were only about 70% accurate. 70% was just not enough for industries to benefit from or take advantage of that technology. Along came this graduate student, and he was an undergraduate who was he'd heard of GPUs, he'd heard of game. He had a GeForce graphics card in his PC. He was also aware of the stuff that NVIDIA was doing around high performance computing, around using GPUs, not for video games, but for the mathematical computations for computational fluid dynamics and simulation. By then, a few of the supercomputers had started using GPUs for accelerating computations. And, but he recognized this math was actually very similar to the math that he was trying to do in his bespoke cold winter of AI, doing his AI research. So he ported some of his code to the GPUs. And as a result, he could train what took an entire semester in a single month. It was a game changer for him. He wrote the first AI framework before TensorFlow, before PyTorch, before any AI software had been written at scale. He ported it to the GPU. As a result, he crushed the competition. He got to a what was state of the art around the 70 percentile. He hit 82%. By the next time, and blew everyone out of the water. Soon by the next competition, half the contestants were using AI. They were getting to 80, 89%. Today, everyone uses AI for video recognition. They've actually stopped doing the competition because the computer got more accurate than humans. It became difficult to judge when you have a superhuman AI. How do you know if you got the right answer? You had to do a panelist. So it's been since then that kicked off the revolution for AI. The community found us and GPUs, and we've been investing ever since that moment.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing because you focused on what happened in 2012, and the government is on record as having been working on AI since 1957. So there's been a lot of work that's going on in the field of or around the technology of artificial intelligence, and really rapidly accelerating. So here you are, Ian, 15 years or longer than 15 years at NVIDIA. You own the accelerated computing business here, and GPUs have found their way into the world's progress on artificial intelligence in all kinds of workflows and use cases and like. And so why is that the case?
Well, once that AI was shown as to get to those levels of accuracy, to deliver those results that are truly superhuman, it didn't take long for companies like Google and Amazon to recognize the commercial value and the consumer value of doing AI use cases. Every time you talk to your phone and it answers back, that's actually an AI neural network. And what made voice recognition so natural, and this voice coming back so human sounding, is because of AI. Traditional methods, statistical methods for doing voice recognition or speech synthesis have long since been retired. Today, it's neural networks like Tacotron and WaveNet and other things that make that human interaction so real. So once companies like Google, once the consumer applications for AI became prevalent, that's a huge amount of research and development and understanding of what AI can do. Today, it is used everywhere. It probably isn't everyone in America probably is experiencing AI. They just don't know it. Every time you go to a website, every time you see your news feed, chances are every time you pick a movie or see a movie that's recommended for you to watch, chances are a neural network, I'm pretty sure a neural network made that decision and helped you have that experience, enjoyed that website, or found the next movie you want to watch. It's dramatically improved the way we interact with computers. So as a result, the investment's been huge, and the applications for AI are becoming endless. Today, it's about conversational AI, using computers to understand what I'm saying, understand what I mean, find me that answer, and speak it back to me. We see applications in recommender systems for what should be my news feed, what products I should want to watch, what movies I want to watch. We see applications in AI in video processing and video understanding, not just the ImageNet picture understanding from before, but now understanding what's inside of our video content. Most of the material uploaded to the internet is actually video and streaming. Think TikTok, think YouTube, right? Computers now can understand what's inside that content and moderate it, understand it, and provide, feed it back to you or appropriately select the right things that are right for you and your family or your interests. So it's literally everywhere now. And I'm really excited to see the rest of industries, the federal government, and different applications of AI get deployed. It started with the hyperscalers, the Googles and Amazons who had the brain trust to go swarm it. We're now getting to a point where AI is accessible and understandable by the rest of industry and the folks here in the federal government.
Right. And so for those that might not be aware of the capabilities of our GPUs, what is it about the GPU, whether it's at the edge or on-prem or in the cloud, that have made them so special to the advancement of artificial intelligence?
Yeah. Great question. I get asked this a lot. Certainly you can do AI with any old CPU server. The challenge is performance. If you're training a neural network, you're teaching it how to recognize something in an image or recognize my voice. We have to train these neural networks, which means we have to give them a ton of data. AI is only successful if you can give it enormous amounts of data to train. And doing that on a CPU architecture, unfortunately, is just too slow. That was the problem with AI for the longest time. It had this great promise, but we just didn't have the computational horsepower to deliver accurate enough results or train the models to get smart enough to be commercially viable. GPUs came along. We're a different kind of processor. We started from our roots in graphics, which is basically not just how fast you can run one program, but how fast you can run one program over 1 million pixels, or every pixel on your screen is actually running that program. You build a fundamentally different kind of architecture. You build an architecture that's really good at massively parallel problems and extremely high throughput. As a result, we have orders of magnitude 100 to 1,000 times faster than CPUs at those kinds of problems. And AI is one of them. It's able to ingest and learn and compute on massive amounts of data really fast. So that's the training part. And once you build that model, you can now deploy it, which is we call it inferencing, which is running it in production. As this video stream is coming to you, an AI can be run on every pixel to recognize what I'm saying or gestures or et cetera. We have to do that in real time. So meeting those real-time requirements for some of these very large neural network models requires a GPU as well to deliver the latency and performance and throughput. So we end up not only delivering on the performance, but also at scale, we save a ton of money. Typical deployments, what would be a few hundred or a few thousand CPU servers, we can literally do in one rack of GPUs. So that cost savings goes direct. So there really isn't a logical reason why you wouldn't be using GPUs for AI. If only because of the economic reasons, we literally save our customers tens to 100x over what their CPU infrastructure would be.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. So a part of our story is, of course, the role of GPUs in accelerating the world's progress in artificial intelligence. But we had to give the developer community and the engineers access to the hardware. And we did that through something that you played a role in inventing, CUDA. I think it would be great to give the audience perspective of exactly what is CUDA and how does it relate to GPUs and why is it so important?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, GPUs are a different kind of architecture. They're designed to be massively parallel. They're not like a traditional vector machine or not a multi-core CPU. We literally have thousands of things happening at the same time inside of a GPU, which to a programmer can be quite daunting. How do you program something that's got 10,000 cores, all executing in parallel? We don't think that way as humans. We think linearly. So the the work that we did at Stanford early on was to study, hey, there's this new kind of architecture, this new kind of computing going on. It's being used for computer graphics, but it clearly has potential elsewhere. So my PhD was in programming systems and programming models to understand different ways of programming it. NVIDIA was sponsoring my work, along with the federal government, by the way, DOE and DARPA. Thank you. And as a result, our CEO invited me to come to NVIDIA to do it for real. And took the research, started over, built it from scratch, now with the architecture and hardware team to build a programming model and language that could allow people to program it. What CUDA is a very simple way of programming in a massively parallel way, but giving the programmer a simple view that they're familiar from the CPU side, but allows it to scale to thousands of parallel computations in parallel. And we do that in standard programming languages, whether it's C, Fortran, there's been work done in Java, even Python. There's lots of ways to program. We take traditional programming paradigms and give them a way to massively, to just dial it all the way up to 10,000 and run that program in parallel 10,000 wide. We tend to focus on just the performance critical portions of the code. So just those inner loops, those parts of the computation, which are compute intensive, where the work is, where the time is spent, move those to the GPU. The other thing we did was we made it available everywhere. This isn't, bespoke. We put it in every gaming PC, GPU, every gaming PC, every laptop. It's available now in the cloud. For just a few cents of an hour, you can rent a GPU. Even some of the hyperscalers provide training instances for free. Download CUDA, start programming. If you're not a programmer, you can also just download TensorFlow or download some of the AI frameworks. There's a whole litany of software packages that have already been accelerated since we've been investing in this platform for well over 15 years since I've been working on it. There's lots and lots of applications. I think over almost 800 applications that are now GPU accelerated.
It's quite amazing. I think you all at the time released CUDA in 2006, and there's now more than 2 million developers. And then we bring that community together via GTC every year. And this year, as we transition to virtual GTCs, I think we had more than 100,000 people register for our GTCs this year. So it's quite extraordinary. So this great programming environment that gives people access to this incredible hardware that we've been bringing to the marketplace for GPUs have been out in the marketplace for more than 20 years. And thus, they play a significant role in the world's progress in artificial intelligence. Okay, so Ian, let's bring it home. You spent a ton of time in and around our federal government customers, whether it was helping build the Summit supercomputer down at Oak Ridge or testifying for Congress and meeting with government execs all over the country. The typical question that comes out is, okay, we get it. This is big. We have to get on board this train. We got to do it now. There's compelling reasons. So what kind of advice might you make to the federal government, whether they be middle managers, executives, developers, and the like, relative to getting started with artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it can be daunting. This is AI, right? So to someone who hasn't dipped their toe in the water, where do you start? Because there's all sorts of applications, but how does it work to your problem? My first advice is do something. You don't have to solve your world's biggest problems. AI certainly has amazing potential to do amazing things, but you learn a lot by just doing something simple and easy and quick to dip your toe in the water, understand some of these new workflows, because it is a new workflow. This is software writing software through data. You give it a bunch of data and it comes back with you, the program, how to solve that problem. Easy places to start. Then there's lots of ways to do it. Certainly, if you have people that have, if you have data scientists in your workforce, they absolutely should be experimenting and trying out applying AI to their data science problems. And there are easy ways to do that. There are both services. They can just get started with service-based approaches where the neural networks are just trained for them, or they use existingly trained networks. We make all of our networks available through our website. If you go to ngc.nvidia.com, you can download neural network models that are good at language processing, image recognition, speech synthesis. There's a whole basket of technologies. The easiest one to start with is imaging. Certainly that is the most mature. If you have a problem where you want to recognize what's in this image or put a bounding box around a particular thing of interest, those networks are very well established. Those workflows are very well established. And it's simply labeled data in and prediction out. And there's lots of tutorials for doing that. NVIDIA, more advanced use cases is natural language processing. So sentiment analysis, give it a piece of text. Is this a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Or is this about a particular topic or not about a particular topic? Or there's also applications for search. So find me the part of the text that talks about this or this technology or mentioning that. These are applications that are well understood. Their workflows are online. And NVIDIA also tries to help too. We have a program called DLI, or Deep Learning Institute, which is all online now, where users or groups or divisions can go and sign up, get trained. We'll walk you through a couple of examples of how to apply this stuff, how to curate your data, put it in a form that AI can consume, how to present the labels, and do some basic training. It all is cloud-based. You don't need to have any GPUs, equipment at all. You can just get started right away. Eventually, as you scale up, you're going to either consume in the cloud or want to build out your own infrastructure, and we can help you with that as well. Certainly all the way up to the supercomputer scale stuff that some of the most advanced users are doing. And finally, I mentioned we have hackathons that go around, happen around the world for different institutes or areas. We've done multiple hackathons in DOE spaces. We've done hackathons for DOD. We've done hackathons for even at the state or EDU level, where customers bring their toy problems or representative problems or even their real problems, sit down with an NVIDIA team member and hack it out for a few days. Enjoy a little virtual pizza in this time of COVID, and pick up a t-shirt along the way.
Okay, all right, and there you have it. So some context about CUDA, GPUs, and how NVIDIA is playing a role in the world's progress in artificial intelligence, and how we might also support the U.S. federal government's journey in artificial intelligence. So Ian, thank you for joining the program today. Appreciate your wisdom and your insight. I'd also like to give a special shout out to Goldie Kamali and FedScoop for hosting this, the FedScoop AI Week, a really important topic for a really big marketplace and a lot of compelling reasons why we must move faster. Get started now, and we look forward to participating in the government's AI journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello to everyone at the 2020 Fed Talks. Thank you for having me with you today virtually. You know, I started my career as a tech entrepreneur, and I know how transformative technology is and will continue to be. Now more than ever, we're really seeing the critical role technology plays in our daily lives. You know, whether it's telehealth, not just during the global pandemic, but making sure that that's available going forward, boosting our contract tracing efforts, our work with Google and Apple on the app, conducting business remotely, even communicating with our loved ones and our families. One of my main goals as governor has been to ingrain technology into the very DNA of state government. That makes government more efficient, saves taxpayer money, and makes us more effective in providing consumers the services that they need. Since taking office, we've taken a number of steps to really help make Colorado a model nationally for how government can better utilize technology to serve customers. In fact, we've created a digital dashboard that tracks our goals and holds us accountable for showing our progress on technological innovation to improve our efficiency, providing transparency to any Coloradan, very easy to use, interactive website. Last year, we launched something that's very exciting, Colorado Digital Services, that is basically folks who've been in the private sector, top technologists from diverse backgrounds, and say, you know what, why don't you do a tour of service in the public sector? Come for 6 months or a year, sabbatical, if you will, from your high-powered job as a programmer, developer, a manager, and come help make a difference to improve services and efficiency for our great state of Colorado. And you know what? The Colorado Digital Service has played a really important role in the COVID-19 response. They helped our Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment develop contract tracing, disease reporting, analytical information to make decisions on. They utilize user-centered design to make sure technology and services are easily used by Coloradans of various degrees of technical aptitude. They also worked with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment to make sure that we're using the right technology to get the dollars out the door from the federal government for people that are temporarily unemployed and others. And we were proud that Colorado was actually recognized as one of the best states in the nation in distributing benefits. We also launched the My Colorado app last year to provide secure and convenient access to state services. The goal is to really help make sure that you can have a virtual transaction with the state, like renewing your driver's license, utilizing a number of other DMV services. And kind of the capstone of that is that Coloradans can now use the digital ID, which is a contactless ID option, particularly useful during the pandemic. But when we sort of came up with it, the pandemic hadn't started yet. Basically, you can show your driver's license on your digital device, and that can be valid to be carded at a bar or for law enforcement purposes. And we're really exciting to encourage widespread adoption of the Colorado Digital ID as less and less people carry wallets around, physical wallets. They're moving virtual, cash moving virtual. That's not us, that's happening outside of us. But then the state ID piece, making sure that that's virtual as well. You know, throughout this pandemic, telemedicine has been a tool that helps bridge the gap for many Coloradans. It helps break down geographic barriers to access to the best healthcare no matter where you live. Behavioral health access, a lot of that's gone virtual using technology, people dealing with anxiety, depression. And there's a lot of uncertainty out there. And that's made the need more than ever for a lot of these services. You know, as we've adapted to life during the pandemic, we've really incorporated technology into every way we live in so many new and different ways. Frankly, I don't know where we'd be without it. Technology is a powerful tool that's helping us respond to an unprecedented global health crisis and global economic crisis. Thank you for having me here today, and thank you for all your work.
Thank you to all of our fabulous speakers. All of these sessions are now available on demand. Tomorrow we have another incredible lineup for you, and we'll be discussing exciting topics like digital transformation, data and AI, the procurement workforce of the future, the role of AI in curbing abuse online, augmenting intelligence with AI, and transforming AI research. I'd like to take a moment to thank our Diamond sponsors again for their support: AWS, Dell Technologies, Google Cloud, IBM, Intel, Leidos, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Qualtrics, Salesforce, SUSE, VMware, and Worldwide Technology. See you back here tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you.